It was a peaceful night in a city. In one house, a light was still on. The room inside was messy, and in the middle of it stood a man looking at his bank book. He finally saved enough money. Bending toward the light, Akina Shoji, a company worker, felt ready to quit his job and start his own business. He was happy to leave the office behind and proud that he had not upset his boss, even after working many long hours. Shuji had delayed his salary for months to save money for his store. A magazine had inspired him to follow this dream. His new life, free from company rules, was about to begin. But then, his head felt pain. Once again, he had stayed up all night. This tired feeling was normal for him. It often came right before he passed out. Even as he lost consciousness, Shuji felt happy. He planned to get back to work after he rested. Sometime later, he woke up in a weird place. He found himself on the floor lying in the middle of a glowing magic circle. 4 people stood above him, soldiers in armor and people who looked like magicians. At first, Shuji thought he was dreaming. But then a man sitting on a throne, King Rao, told him that this wasn't a dream. He had been summoned to another world. Shuji introduced himself and the king explained their problem. Their land was under constant attack by demons and things were getting worse. They had summoned a hero to help. The king asked to use Shuji's power, but Shuji, thinking this was just a boring dream, said he had no power. Then the king told him that heroes would always receive special powers from God. He told him to shout, "Skill open, see them." Shuji nervously repeated the words. Suddenly, a screen appeared in front of him. It showed his name, age, and his special skill. His ability was called Cultivation. Based on the explanation, he realized he could grow anything in the ground and make it grow very fast. He told everyone about his skill. The king and his people didn't seem excited. They were disappointed and said the skill was not useful. Someone suggested using him as a decoy or even replacing him with another hero. The king told everyone to calm down and said they would use Shuji's skill for farming instead. He gave Shuji a field at the edge of the capital and use his skills to create food for the country. Shuji just wanted was to wake up from this dream and start his own business. However, Shuji soon found himself in a field feeling bored. With the king's permission, he had been living there for a week. During that time, he couldn't wake up from this dream. He tried using his skill to grow vegetables, still hoping it would be useful. He found that he could grow plants in just a few days, but that was all his skill could do. It wasn't enough to keep him interested, and he soon got bored. On the 8th day, Shuji began to realize that he was not in dream but reality. He decided to visit the king. Later, he stood before the ruler and explained how things were going. After thanking Rao, Shuji showed the vegetables he had grown. The king and those around him were surprised since Shuji can grow vegetables fast. Impressed, the king said he wanted to buy the entire harvest to help solve hunger in the country. Seeing that the king was in a good mood, Shuji asked how long he would stay in this world. He guessed it would be until another hero was summoned. The king didn't understand at first, so Shuji explained that he had hoped to return home when a new hero arrived. But the answer shocked him. It was impossible to go back. It was a shocking statement from the king. Later that day, Shuji got drunk and lost his temper. He cursed at the king, angry that he had been brought to this world without his consent. In the end, he became a simple farmer. Even though he worked hard, saved money, and never inherited his parents' house, life was tough. Once he calmed down, he started thinking about his past. His parents had been farmers who spent all their time working in the fields. Shuji found ways to entertain himself, but everything changed one day. His father, worried about their future, attended a neighborhood seminar that turned out to be a scam. His parents took on debt and worked extra hours to pay it off. Not long after, his father died. The life insurance helped cover the debt, but when Shuji reached adulthood, his mother also passed away as if she felt relieved. Seeing how his parents ended up, Shuji gave up on farming and became an office worker, trying to live a better life. He worked hard for years, saved money, and dreamed of starting his own business. He desperately saved money. But in this new world, he realized he couldn't even open a bank account. Feeling defeated, Shuji finished his last bottle of alcohol. A drunken thought came into his mind. He hoped he could get more booze with his skill. Thinking it was a great plan, he went to the field and buried the empty bottle, hoping a beer tree would grow. A second later, he passed out in the field. When morning came, Shuji woke up with a hangover. He remembered that he had spent all his money on liquor. As he looked up, he noticed a tree with bottles hanging from its branches. He was surprised by how many bottles were there because he remembered leaving only one in the field. Then he recalled that he had used his cultivation skill on it. He was still unsure on what was happening. He wondered if alcohol in this world grew from trees. Still, that should be impossible, and he doubted they were liquor in the first place. He picked one and discovered that the cork was a stem. After opening a bottle, he poured some into a glass and tasted it. The drink turned out to be the same liquor he had. Since he had a lot of liquor to himself, Shuji went to a liquor store in the kingdom's shopping district. He offered to sell the liquor. The merchant was surprised seeing a lot of them. Shuji explained that they were thank you gifts, but he couldn't drink everything. After thinking it over, the merchant tried a sip, planning to buy it if he liked it. After tasting it, he got surprised by how they tasted nice and offered 8 silver coins for all the bottles. This was a good deal since items made through the cultivation skill were high quality. After the sale, Shuji asked about how these kind of alcohol were made. The seller told him that he could ask that question in the brewery for their method. That answer made Shuji think that alcohol making was normal in this world. Shuji also asked about skills and learned that others had them too. He wondered breweries also uses skills to brew, like how farmers could have farming-related skills. But the merchant said he have not heard such rumors, but people with fighting skills earned more as adventurers. Shuji realized that others would see his farming skills as weak and useless, but he decided that was actually an advantage. After leaving the bar, Shuji planned to grow items that sold well. Soon he stood in front of a garden full of items: shields, swords, potions, and more. All of them had grown from the ground. He experimented by planting everything he could find to understand his skill better. For safety and privacy, he also built a fence around the area. Looking at what he had grown, Shuji realized his skill was powerful. He could grow almost anything. If something didn't have seeds, he just buried it like a potato. Even normal fruits grew overnight, which made him question if other jobs were even needed. His best plant was one that grew coins. He could grow his own money. Shuji knew the king and his court would eventually find out about his skill. Because of that, he thought about making the fence stronger and finding someone else to support him. Shuji believed that if the king understood how useful his skill was, he might be forced to work like a slave. He didn't want to live the same life his exploited parents did, so he decided to use the skill for his own benefit. He thought about going into hiding after cultivating more gold. However, that would be him being exploitative instead. He realized he could just start his own business, something he had always wanted. With his power, he believed it was possible, so he chose to become a peddler or wandering merchant. He used his skill to prepare, paid the fee to join the merchant guild, bought a new cart, and sold part of his harvest to get the money he needed to start. After some time, all the preparations were finished. Shuji remembered how, in the past, he had worked too hard and pushed himself beyond his limits. He had managed to save some money, but then he suddenly ended up in another world with no way back. When he was ready to begin his new journey, he felt sure that he would start his own business. This time, no one would take advantage of him. He planned to live the way he wanted and do his best. Before leaving, he decided to hire someone to travel with him, since there was a chance of running into bandits on the road. At the same time, he wanted to hire a woman who could fight well, thinking it would look impressive if she defeated enemies with skill and style. That was what he hoped for. But when Shuji met the person he hired, he saw a girl lying on the ground, crying. She had broken her weapon again, even though the job she was doing wasn't that difficult. Shuji noticed something odd about her and started to wonder if it was just part of how things worked in this new world. In front of Shuji, the girl sat on the ground crying over a broken weapon. Seeing her like that reminded him of how they first met. Back then, he had just finished getting ready and was waiting for his escort. Soon, a group of adventurers from the guild arrived. They looked dependable, something Shuji noticed right away when he introduced himself. The group included a warrior named Kyle, an archer named Kava, and a girl with long, shiny hair. Shuji couldn't help but notice her. She looked calm, especially with those oversized gloves, but in her hand was a large steel rod. Shuji asked for her name. She nervously introduced herself as Main, and her long rod was for hitting enemies. Shuji commented that it was actually a smart way to fight. It showed that appearances could be misleading. Her teammates, however, warned her not to break her weapon again or slow them down. This made Shuji a bit unsure about her. He found it hard to believe that such a solid weapon could break. He guessed she had already broken her first one. After introductions, the group started their journey. As time passed, Shuji grew bored and tried to start a conversation. He asked if they were always a team together, but one of them claimed there was no way their team with the weapon killer. When the girl reacted a bit strongly, it made Shuji curious about how she got the nickname Weapon Killer. Just as the warrior began to explain, someone nearby shouted. Suddenly, a group of bandits appeared, surrounding them and demanding money, and the girl. These bandits were from a gang called the Bloody Idiots. Even though the situation looked bad, the adventurers were ready to fight back. The archer quickly told Shuji to hide inside the carriage and gave instructions to the others. Shuji locked himself inside. Through a small window, he watched the battle happen. The carriage was built like a small shelter, keeping him safe. But even while hiding, he wanted to see how strong his escorts really were. The archer started shooting at the enemies and rained down arrows on them. Even someone new like Shuji could see how strong he was. Not far away, the team's spearman was also fighting, cutting down enemies one after another, showing his strength. Shuji noticed that only 2 people were actually fighting. He then looked at the girl who had been told to join the battle by the spearman. She ran toward the enemies holding a staff. Shuji was confused and didn't know how she planned to fight. Her movements made him doubt that she was a real adventurer. Then, with her eyes shut in fear, the girl hit one of the bandits in the stomach. While the bandit was laughing at her for the light tap, a powerful force came out from her metal rod, sending him flying. The other bandits and even Shoji in the cart were shocked. After seeing one of their own crash to the ground after being thrown so high, the remaining bandits ran away in fear. Shuji realized the girl was strong, but then he saw her fall to the ground, crying in front of a broken metal rod. He couldn't understand how such thick metal broke so easily and wondered how much power it took to do that. That was how the spearman's story continued. The girl had great strength, which caused her weapons to break often. Because of this, people started calling her the weapon killer. Later on, the girl happily ran with a new mithril sword, a reward for defeating the bandits. Her teammates told her to sell it before she would break it, since it was worth around 200 gold coins. When Shuji heard this, he thought he could make money by selling swords if he cultivate them with his skill. But the girl refused to sell the sword. She said she wouldn't break or sell it. Then the archer told everyone to move faster so they could reach the city soon. Even with everything that had happened, they were almost there. Later, the merchants group arrived at the city, driving through narrow streets. Shuji saw a merchant town in another world for the first time. People were busy with their work, and he looked forward to starting their first business there. Outside a tavern, Shuji told his mercenaries to rest since he planned to start trading the next day. He believed the city was safe enough. The mercenaries were unsure about their payment getting cut off, but Shuji promised to pay them the full amount. That promise quickly earned him their respect, as they never heard this kind of treatment before. After that, everyone went their separate ways. Kava rested in the tavern and Kyle went to chase some women. Shuji assumed it was just an overnight with a slave. However, the girl, Main, decided to stay behind. She quietly called out to him with a small request after everyone said their goodbyes. A little later, she became out of breath, carrying 5 large boxes with ease. She helped Shuji carry the heavy load. Shuji thanked her and Main told him it was no problem. Shuji had spoken with the merchant guild and made plans to open a shop in the town's free market overnight. He couldn't leave the girl at the inn because she wanted to help sell and carry goods for an extra income, using her superhuman strength. Soon after, they sat under their tent and laid out all the items. As they worked, Main spotted a beautiful piece of fabric. She pointed it out to Shuji, who became curious about how it was made. It turned out to be part of a handkerchief that Shuji had brought from his old world. He gave one to Main and she smiled brightly as she thanked him. To him, it was just a cheap item he had bought long ago. After setting everything up on the counter, Shuji was ready to sell. He had prepared too many items and got a bit carried away with his cultivation skill. Main was amazed by the number and variety of goods. Then Shuji noticed that most of the market visitors were middle-class customers. He arranged the goods carefully, placing food items in front and expensive ones in the back. That way, if someone tried to steal, they would likely take the cheaper items instead of the valuable ones. It didn't take long for people to gather nearby. Shuji and Main loudly announced the opening of their first business, a traveling store, and called out to people passing by. Most of the crowd were men who came after hearing Main's voice. This made Shuji happy because it meant there was a better chance of selling the large number of items they brought. Shuji kept telling everyone about the opening of his mobile shop. He swore to sell these products he had grown with his cultivation skill. These included food, alcohol, and clothes, which surprised the buyers. Still, Shuji felt that he had brought too much stock. During the sales, customers tried asking for the price of a bundled radish. He offered the price of 2 copper coins. This shocked everyone, confusing Shuji. He had been comparing coin values between his world and this one, where vegetables usually cost about 200 yen, but he had forgotten that there was a food shortage in this kingdom. He raised the price by 8 copper coins, which was still considered cheap in the market. Shuji was surprised that it was still considered as cheap despite being overpriced. The next popular item was dried meat, sold at 30 copper coins. The customers were amazed. They said it was cheaper than what another store offered, making it a good deal. After hearing the prices, they bought all the meat and vegetables in large amounts. Soon these items were completely sold out, but people kept buying whatever else was left. After some time, Shuji sighed in surprise at how fast the goods had sold. Then a group of housewives arrived looking for the cheap meat. Shuji quickly explained that only clothes were left. Though the clothes were second-hand, they were still in good condition and priced at 3 gold coins. The residents were shocked again. Back in Shuji's world, you could buy decent clothes for around 2,000 yen, so he felt that 3,000 yen or 3 gold coins was a fair price in this world. A moment later, the women left in a hurry, saying they needed a minute. They came back with bags of money and bought all the clothes without leaving anything behind. Shuji already confirmed that the sewing technology in this world was underdeveloped during the time when he bought these clothes from the capital's thrift shop. He bought a bulk one time and increased their numbers by tenfold afterward with his cultivation skill. While most of the food was sold quickly, there were still many boxes of clothes left. However, the women soon bought those as well. Shuji was about to open another box, but when he turned around, he saw that all the boxes were empty. Realizing everything was sold out, he announced that the goods for the day were gone. The other merchants were surprised since it was still morning. He promised to bring more items next time and was surprised by how eager the housewives were to get good deals. The next morning, Main felt happy about Shuji's success, and the warrior was impressed by how well he handled trade. They were already near the capital and so far had not run into any bandits on the way back. But when they mentioned this, they remembered that the journey wasn't over yet. Suddenly, another group of bandits appeared, just like before. The archer and spearman got ready for battle. Main pulled out her mithril sword, wanting to fight by herself and show how strong her weapon was. She seemed different from how she was during the last battle. Still, the spearman warned her not to break the sword. As the bandits attacked, Shuji hid in the carriage and Main struck the enemy with a strong hit. The sword held up for at least one attack, which was expected from a mithril blade. Saying she wasn't done yet, she rushed at the others and even cut one of their steel clubs in half. Main beat the enemies one by one with great effort. Shuji noticed that her movements had changed, but there was one problem. She was pushing herself too hard. After a few more strikes, the mithril sword broke. It couldn't handle Main's strength. She wouldn't have noticed unless Shuji pointed it out. After the battle, Main was totally depressed. The spearman said that luck wasn't on her side and no one expected the mithril sword to break. It showed just how outrageous Main's strength really was. That sword had once belonged to a bandit, but now it was just a broken weapon. Still hopeful, Main looked through the items they had taken from the bandits to find another mithril weapon. But the others noticed she had already destroyed any that were there. After the fight, the men teased Main for being a weapon killer, and she didn't know what to do. Shuji noticed how the men looked down on Main and could understand why. A little later in the royal capital, Shuji paid the adventurers for their service and said goodbye to them on good terms. As he continued with his errands, he thought about the girl. He believed she should have found a middle ground. Main's power was strong, and Shuji wondered if he could use his own cultivation skill to help her control it. But when he came back to reality, he reminded himself that he needed to focus on his own safety first. He didn't know when the kingdom might decide to kill him for being useless, or force him to serve them if they discovered the true strength of his skill. So, Shuji made up his mind to leave the kingdom as soon as possible. To prepare, he gathered some information. The area near the capital was safe enough for people to go out and shop, but there were bandits outside the city. He knew he would need a bodyguard. He thought about the warrior and archer he had worked with before, but he figured they were already busy. So, Shuji decided he would visit the Adventurers Guild the next time he went out to trade. The next day at the guild, Shuji stood at the entrance and saw something shocking. Main was being threatened and could be turned into a slave. When Shuji stepped into the guild entrance, he was surprised by what he saw. Main had called out to him, saying she couldn't pay the interest on her debt. Because of that, she was about to be taken away. Shuji sighed, annoyed by the new problem. He asked how much she owed. The repayment was 1 gold coin per month, with 4 extra silver coins as interest. Shuji could afford to pay it, but he knew that doing so wouldn't fix the real issue. So instead, he spent 2 gold coins to buy the mithril sword she broke the other day. This gave Main enough money left over to buy a new weapon. She was truly thankful for the help. The moneylender took the payment and left, shouting that if Main didn't pay next time, she would become a slave. Shuji asked what had happened and suggested they talk more in the cafeteria across the street. Later, while sitting at a table, Main explained that she had a skill called superhuman. It boosted her physical strength, but she couldn't control it well, so she often broke her weapons. Shuji realized her ability seemed more impressive than his own cultivation skill. But sadly, her power didn't stop her from feeling pain. Because of that, she avoided using her bare hands. Some monsters were too strong for cheap weapons, so she kept buying expensive ones on credit. Every time she broke a weapon, her debt grew. Shuji guessed that was the reason why people started calling her Weapon Killer. Main also said she tried joining the army, but she kept destroying the equipment and putting her teammates in danger and was let go each time. Now, because she couldn't repay her debts, she risked being forced into slavery. Thinking about her situation, Shuji believed becoming a slave over something like this was terrible. But in a way, he was also a slave, working for a company where his boss didn't know his true abilities. Just like him, Main was a talented person who had been misunderstood and unable to use her full potential. A little later, Shuji dragged a sack along the craftsman's street in the royal capital. He stopped in front of a building with a sign showing swords, hoping it was the right place. As he got closer, steam came from the door and hit him with heat. When he stepped inside, he caught the attention of the blacksmith, who was still working. The blacksmith told his current customer to wait. Shuji was surprised to see someone from the gnome race for the first time. He told the blacksmith that there were no gnomes in his hometown, and this was the first time he had heard of such a country. The blacksmith got straight to the point and asked what Shuji needed. Shuji set the large sack down and poured its contents onto the table. They were dozens of broken mithril swords. The blacksmith was shocked. It was actually the same broken sword Shuji had bought from Main, but his skill had caused them to multiply. Shuji asked the blacksmith to repair one sword and use the rest to create a new weapon. Since he couldn't handle the mithril himself, he had to rely on someone skilled. He also wondered if the dwarf could make something even better than the original sword. The blacksmith agreed but said it would cost 20 gold coins. Without hesitation, Shuji handed over a bag of gold coins in advance. Seeing this trust, the blacksmith introduced himself. His name was Maud, and he promised to do his best. Outside, Shuji was glad that the blacksmith respected him. It meant a lot after all he had done. He had always believed that there was no true reward or respect in the world, only work and duty. Even so, he planned to protect his pride as a merchant, no matter how hard it became. 10 days later, he returned to the guild and met Main there. He claimed he had a quest for her and asked her to move to his office. The building looked more like a private house, which made Main think strange thoughts. But he calmed her down and asked about her work as an adventurer, and if she already bought a new weapon. Main flinched and showed how the weapon she bought with his money got broken already. Then he asked if she wanted to become his escort guard full-time. He wasn't sure about his safety in the future since he planned to open a business, so he needed someone to protect him all the time. When Main said she might break another weapon, he told her it wasn't a problem and pointed to something under a cloth. When Shuji pulled the cloth back, it revealed several dozen swords. Main was surprised not only by how many swords there were, but also by how each one of them were made out of mithril. Main couldn't understand why such expensive weapons were kept in a shabby cabin. Shuji told her she could use any weapons she wanted, and destroy them freely if she agreed to work for him. He also said he would take on her debt so she can work freely. Main was shocked and thought the offer was too much. So Shuji added some conditions. She had to stay with him all the time while he worked and go with him no matter what kind of danger was involved. However, she must not enter any places he told her not to go in. Even with the conditions, Main still couldn't believe the offer. Then Shuji talked about the pay. He said it would be 40 gold coins per month and he would be deducting the debt little by little from the salary. Now he wanted to hear how much her current debt. When she heard this, she told him that she had a debt of 1,000 gold coins. The debt kept growing because of the high interest. Even though the total amount was more than 10 million yen in Japanese currency, Shuji said he could pay it off with her next payment. Main was surprised by how much money Shuji had. He then asked what she thought about the job he offered, but Main still had doubts. Shuji let her break weapons that he paid for, and it seemed like hiring her cost him more than what he would gain. The real reason Shuji hired her was because he believed in her amazing superhuman skill. He understood that Main just didn't know how to use it properly yet. He held her hands and told her he wanted to give her a chance to grow. He promised to give her as many weapons as she needed and even said that one day, he would get her a weapon that would never break, no matter what. He wanted her to choose to work for someone who saw her true worth, even if he seemed like a fraud at the moment. Shuji cleared away her doubts by saying that her strength mattered and that she didn't have to carry her nickname anymore. He promised that, one day, it would just be a funny memory. Main, feeling encouraged by Shuji's faith in her, said she wanted to become his subordinate and stop resenting her own power. When they made the deal, she promised to stay by his side and fight with all her strength to protect him. As she wiped her tears on his clothes, Shuji smiled. He felt proud to have gained a strong partner, someone who would never leave the one who helped her pay off her debt and gave her weapons. He was sure that he had given her a job in a good company with the best boss she could ever have. Sometime later, Shuji and his partner began their journey. He had officially hired Main as his personal guard and planned to visit a nearby city. During the trip, he noticed that the road was becoming more dangerous. Main carried many weapons on her back and belt, was ready to fight. She was happy to be well armed. They also had extra swords in the carriage just in case the others broke. Some of the swords were ones Maud had remade and some were made using Shuji's special skill. Main held her sword and said she was ready for any enemies. The road seemed unsafe, probably because of bandits, but Shuji hoped they wouldn't run into anyone. Then huge monsters suddenly came out of the forest, shaking the ground as they moved. The sight of them made both Shuji freeze in fear. It was the first time Shuji had seen monsters, and he realized that this world had more dangers than he expected. Main told him that these were forest bears. They rarely left the woods, but when they did, they were wild and hard to stop. It looked like they had been chasing people. Shuji thought it would be hard to escape, but Main calmed him down. As long as she had a weapon, she could fight them. That gave Shuji hope. He trusted her strength. Without hesitation, Main jumped off the carriage and rushed toward the monsters. She moved quickly and aimed for the nearest one. As Shuji watched, she dodged the bear's attack and slipped behind it, ready to strike. At that time, Shuji looked out the small window of the carriage and saw that the girl was moving with much more confidence. She cut off one of the charging bear's limbs with ease. Shuji noticed how cleanly she struck and thought that if she had been a normal warrior, the attack would have only hurt the monster, not stopped it. Main, with surprising strength and skill, rushed into a group of monsters. She sliced one of the bears in half, then lunged towards several others, taking them down one by one. Finally, one of her mithril swords broke, but she didn't stop. She quickly pulled out another sword from her belt and attacked again. Main struck another monster without hesitation. Then she noticed even more angry beasts coming at her, drooling and ready to attack. But she didn't back down. She stayed calm, jumped into action, and defeated each monster with strong, clean strikes. Such small girl defeated a lot of monsters thrice her size with ease. She was shining on her own stage. Shuji saw that she had changed completely. Before, she used to hold back because she was afraid of breaking her weapon. That fear made her unsure in battle. But now, because of Shuji and his skill, she didn't have to worry about that anymore. She gave it her all, smiling with joy. The monsters cried out under her attacks. Shuji thought that normally it would take a cannon to stop those creatures. But Main brought them down with just her sword. In that moment, he understood why the king and his men wanted a hero who could fight. Main could have been a great help in war, but the people of this kingdom didn't know how to make full use of her power. Main finished the battle feeling proud. For the first time, she fought without fear of breaking her weapon, and that had always been her dream. After the battle was over, Main and Shuji clapped their hands and the girl promised to protect Shoji. As her sponsor, Shuji was happy for her happiness. Thus, they finished off well off. And a month after Main was recruited, the two of them stood in front of the loan shark's office, planning to pay off the girl's debt. On one of the alleys of the capital, Shuji and Main approached the office of the loan shark company Cultivation, where Main owed money. Before they went inside, Main had doubts. She didn't feel everything was okay because her debt was 1,000 gold coins. Shuji understood why she was worried. 10 million yen was a huge amount, but he told her that he would pay her debt and give her freedom. Even so, Main still felt nervous. Shuji noticed her troubled face and asked her not to worry. He suggested they go inside. Main promised she would protect Shuji with her life if needed. Trusting her words, Shuji opened the office doors. Inside, several men glared at them. Just by their appearance, Shuji could tell they worked as debt collectors and were used to being intimidating. Right away, they started speaking in a rude and harsh way. Shuji realized he wasn't used to this kind of behavior anymore. When the collectors blew cigarette smoke at Main and made fun of her for being in debt, she felt small and powerless. But Shuji stayed calm and comforted her. He turned to the collectors and said they were there to pay off Main's debt. Everyone in the room was shocked. They thought Main had become the lover of a rich man, and that this was done to insult their boss. Shuji didn't understand why the boss would be angry about a debt being paid. Then a man came out of the back room, annoyed by the noise. He was the boss of the moneylenders, dressed in fancy furs. When he saw Main, he laughed and assumed she had finally agreed to be his servant. He claimed he would treat her well and reached out to touch her, but Shuji quickly grabbed his hand and shook it instead. The boss looked confused. Shuji expected something like that to happen and stayed strong. He acted polite and said he was Main's employer, and since she worked with him, he would pay her debt. Cultivation replied that even if Shuji was a kind employer, the debt was still 1,000 gold coins. Not even nobles could pay that much. But then some of the other collectors confirmed that Shuji really intended to pay the full amount. When Cultivation heard this, he looked at Shuji with a confused face. As he poured a drink into his glass, he stayed quiet for a moment, clearly taking the situation seriously. Then he finally spoke. He told Shuji that Main had a special ability, and if Shuji planned to use it, he was out of luck. According to him, her skill made her so strong that her weapons would break, making them useless. He asked if Shuji still wanted to pay off her debt. Shuji replied that he already knew about Main's problems and that he still wanted to pay her debt completely. After he said this, the people from the moneylenders company gave them heavy stares and let out killing intent, and Shuji immediately sensed danger. Their true intentions became clear right after he said he would pay. Shuji didn't understand why Cultivation was so worried about being paid or why he had even lent money to Main, knowing she couldn't repay it. Then he remembered that when they talked about her skill, it made the office boss nervous. That's when he guessed the truth. They planned to trap her with debt and force her to use her power. A servant with such strength could be useful for crimes. Shuji had expected this, and he never planned to let those people take her. Suddenly, Cultivation changed the debt amount to 1,500 coins, which surprised Shuji since they had just agreed on a different number. The boss claimed that his workers had made a mistake with the interest, and the other moneylenders agreed. Main complained that the new amount was unfair, but Cultivation said it was because of the interest that had built up over time. He challenged them to calculate it by hand, standing confidently. This trick worked because most people in that world, except rich folks and merchant apprentices, couldn't read or do math well. That meant Main had no way to check the numbers, which the company took advantage of. But Shuji had already expected something like this. Without hesitation, he dropped a bag with 1,500 gold coins onto the table. The lender stared in shock. Shuji calmly said there were exactly 1,500 coins and told them to count it. Gold-Ed and his men were stunned, not just by the money, but by the fact that Shuji had prepared for this trick. In fact, he had brought even more money, just in case they raised the debt again. It took a while to count, but Gold-Ed's men confirmed the amount, exactly 1,500 gold coins. After that, Shuji asked for a loan agreement since he had already paid the full amount. The contract was quickly brought out. Once Gold-Ed signed it, Shuji added his signature. With that, the deal was complete and the debt was settled. Shuji and the girl quickly left the building. As they walked out, Shuji noticed the office manager forcing a smile. After a short pause, the girl, clearly impressed, thanked Shuji, but he told her that this was just the start. Later that day, as evening came, Shuji and Main were having dinner at his cabin. But the peace wouldn't last long. He knew real fight with the Gold-Ed was about to begin. Soon, shady figures started gathering near Shuji's cabin. Main and Shuji's dinner was cut short by a scream. It meant people had arrived. They had been expecting the robbers, which is why they heard it clearly. Two enemies had fallen into a wolf pit that had been set up earlier. Right after that, it was time to fight back. Main lit the wooden blocks in the fireplace. Holding one burning stick in each hand, she stepped outside, with Shuji wishing her to be careful. As she walked out calmly, one of the attackers spotted her. He had no idea what Main planned to do. Her first move was to throw a burning stick as hard as she could at the nearest enemy, and it hit him. Even a torch became dangerous in Main's hands because of her superhuman skill. One of the bandits shouted for the others to stay calm. He said they just needed to find Shuji to win. But Shuji passed more torches to Main and she threw them at the enemies right away. A man with an eye patch told his group to dodge and warned them not to ignore the torches since they were dealing with someone with a skill. When another group of enemies came closer, Main threw torches at their feet. Some of the bandits laughed, thinking her aim was off, but she was only lighting up the area to show where the enemies were. Right after, Shuji handed a container to Main. She ran toward the enemies and with a loud shout threw its contents at them before they could react. Even after the attack, the bandits didn't know what had hit them. Shuji and Main prepared for another round while Shuji brought another basin, ready for the next move. At that moment, the attackers tried to dodge and ran away, but it didn't help. The attack spread out and hit all of them. Then they realized they needed to hide, so they started looking around for cover. However, Shuji's house was surrounded by a hedge wall, and the trees had already been cut down to make torches. Because of this, burning sticks were thrown to light up the area, showing there was nowhere to hide. Shuji handed Main a basket filled with small stones. These stones once covered the field and Shuji had collected them, thinking they might come in handy. He called the weapon a basket shotgun, and when Main threw it, the attack hit the leader of the attackers. The rest didn't know what to do next, seeing how their leader got done in. Before they could run, Shuji told them to surrender. He warned them that if they tried to escape, he would attack. Realizing how serious the situation was, the bandits gave up and begged for their lives. They didn't want to die for money. Shuji then asked Main to tie them up. She praised Shuji's plan, but he believed that fighting him with just numbers would never work. Later, the Shuji and Main went to the office of the moneylenders who had recently caused trouble. The people inside looked tired, likely because they had been waiting all night for news. When they saw Shuji alive, they were shocked. Shuji didn't understand what they were thinking, so he asked to speak with Gold-Ed, saying he had something important to discuss. One of the staff told him to wait and went to call the boss. Meanwhile, the young man and the girl waited calmly. A little later, Gold-Ed came out of the doorway and asked what business they had. Shuji told him that bandits had broken into his house the day before. Without waiting for a reply, Shuji went straight to the main point. He said the bandits claimed they were sent to kill him on orders from Gold-Ed himself. Shuji said he ignored them and told them he had nothing to do with it. Gold-Ed claimed he was not involved in it. Shuji revealed how the attackers were now enslaved and mockingly commented that he was glad to hear Gold-Ed wasn't involved. Shuji also pointed out how Gold-Ed's earlier attempt to make Main his slave. The moneylender, clearly annoyed, told them to leave. He said he wanted to sleep. Thinking Gold had been working late, Shuji just said staying up too much was bad for his health. Then, guessing the military police would show up soon, he suggested not sleeping at all and left with Main. Outside, Main stayed silent at first. Later, she got upset, not understanding why Shuji had provoked the moneylenders like that. She was still scared and felt uncomfortable being near Gold-Ed. But Shuji calmly explained that he had done it on purpose, so the attackers would act more carefully next time. Main disagreed, thinking it would only make things worse. She believed the attackers would come back again. Shuji agreed, saying that was exactly what he wanted. He said they would only attack again once things seemed peaceful, and next time they would be better prepared. He also explained that since the company cared about its image, he had provoked them into attacking early. All they had to do now was be ready to fight back. Main was surprised at how calm and confident Shuji was. Back on Earth, when he worked for a company, Shuji often had to deal with difficult people. Their way of thinking reminded him of these moneylenders. Later that night, the robbers came back to the house. They didn't notice that Shuji and Main were watching them. The bandits placed a pot on the ground and used magic to create smoke. Soon the house was filled with a thick purple poisonous gas. When Shuji saw the direction of the smoke, Main explained that it was controlled by magic. Since he had already learned about this kind of magic, Shuji wasn't surprised. Everything that happened still seemed normal for another world. Noticing the poisonous smoke, Shuji suggested using potions that could protect against paralysis, poison, and sleep. Expecting that the enemy might change their strategy, he bought many potions and used his cultivation skill to earn more money. He got a full set of potions from the royal capital's potion shop and thought about selling them later because the price was good. At that moment, the robbers started to act. They damaged the fence and created hiding spots. Shuji planned to make them fix the mess later. The bandits slowly entered the house, but no one was inside. When they went deeper into the dark area, two of them suddenly disappeared. They couldn't see what was hiding in the darkness. The whole house was actually a large trap with a deep hole. Main was surprised that someone fell for such a simple trap. Shuji explained that the attackers were hiding and couldn't use light, so they didn't see the hole inside. The trap had been dug by Main using her superhuman skill. One of the attackers, still unsure of what happened inside the house, called for their boss. When Golded realized the plan had been discovered, he arrived and gave the order to light up the inside. A ball of light from one of the magicians showed that there was only a giant hole in the middle of the house. Now that their plan was revealed, the second part of the fight began. After the robbers gathered near the house, they saw the trap set for them. They realized no one was inside, so they started searching the area. At that moment, Shuji relied on Main. Since the enemy couldn't kill her, she was able to fight calmly at the front, while Shuji stayed behind. Shuji noticed a few hooded people among the attackers. He didn't know who they were, but Main moved forward and attacked. When some of the attackers spotted her, they were shocked to see her carrying several large logs. With a loud shout, Main threw the logs into the group of enemies. They weren't ready for it, and the logs hit many of them while also destroying the house. This was part of Shuji's plan. The house could be rebuilt, and it was already old. He had created the logs using his cultivation skill to use as ammunitions, and some of them had been used as torches. After that, Main, still holding a couple of logs, went after the rest of the enemies. She jumped into the group of fleeing robbers, spinning quickly and knocking down everyone she hit. Shuji was impressed by Main's skills, especially when she hit a mage and sent him flying while leaving the light-based magic behind. The robbers then tried to surround her. Since they couldn't hurt her, they aimed to grab the logs and block her movements. They saw one of the logs she was holding was about to break, and when it finally snapped, they rushed in to attack. But they had forgotten that Shuji was currently Main's sponsor. He had given her mithril swords from his armory. With those weapons, Main easily pushed back the enemies. The robbers quickly ran away even though their leader Golded tried to stop them. The head of the moneylenders was not pleased. Only 2 fighters had faced such a large group, so he stepped onto the battlefield himself. Realizing that his followers were useless, Golded ripped the robe off the mysterious robed person and ordered him to join the fight. Shuji and his partner stared in shock at the large man now fully dressed in armor. Main was especially surprised, since Golded had just said that she wasn't the only one with a special skill. Confirming what Shuji and the girl were thinking, Golded explained that this armored man, unlike Main, couldn't pay off his debt and was now a servant of the moneylender. Golded ordered the armored man to capture Main. A powerful attack came at Main, but she managed to dodge it. She then told Shuji to back away. Shuji noticed that Main had slowed down. She was hesitating, knowing the enemy was just an innocent slave forced to fight. Shuji guessed that Main could probably cut through normal armor, but when she struck, her attack failed. At the moment of impact, a glow surrounded the armored man's body, completely destroying Main's weapon in one hit. As the fight continued, Golded explained that his servant had a powerful defense skill. Even someone like Main would struggle against it. This skill didn't just protect the body, it made the armor stronger too. Golded then threatened to force a contract on Main once she was caught, and use it to make her kill Shuji. But Main believed that even if a contract was forced, it couldn't be used to make someone kill. While Shuji thought this over, Golded revealed that their group had a special mage who could create irregular contracts. That explained everything. Shuji had already suspected something like this, but Main was shocked. Main became angry, saying that Golded would be punished once the truth came out. But Golded disagreed. Some nobles in the country supported him. Many people wanted secret work specializing in irregular slave trading, so places like his always had customers. And since the servants were bound by contracts, they couldn't discern what was right or wrong. This gave moneylenders full control. Shuji realized that the kingdom was deeply corrupted. This was the reason why Golded was confidently speaking out loud. Golded's next order was to make the armored man feel pain so he would finally capture Main. As the attack continued, Shuji was shocked to see illegal magic used to cause pain and force someone to obey. Main attacked the enemy again, but her weapon broke. She tried to get a spare sword from Shuji, but other servants blocked her path. She couldn't fight back, and the only thing she had left was a scabbard. Then Main looked back at Shuji and made a quick decision that surprised him. Just then, Golded gave another order to attack. Even though Main had no weapon, a wild-eyed knight charged at her. Ignoring Shuji's concern, she grabbed the scabbard and used it to trick the enemy. The knight fell for it, and Main struck with the scabbard. The blow passed through the armor, hitting from the belt up to the chest. At that moment, Akina noticed something important. All of Main's earlier attacks had been aimed at the same spot. Because of that, the enemy's defense skill had reached its limit, leaving only normal armor. Main couldn't stand seeing the knight suffer while still obeying orders. But since he was planning to attack Shuji, she decided to stop him. She used all her strength and launched a final set of attacks. Main won the fight, and after landing on the ground said she would be Shuji's guard. Shuji was glad. Seeing this, one of the bandits ran away, even though the boss had told him to attack the unarmed heroes. When Main faced Golded again, he ordered his slaves to cover for him and ran from the battlefield, shouting threats. They failed to capture Golded, and Main felt disappointed. But Shuji didn't mind. He believed Golded was already finished. Even though their office was protected by nobles, Shuji can still do something about it. 2 days later in the evening, constables arrived at the moneylender's office to investigate suspicions of illegal trading. They only found the servants there. Golded had already escaped. Afterward, the soldiers checked the magic contracts used on the servants. They discovered that illegal magic had been hidden within them. Because of this, Golded was placed on the wanted list for illegal slave trading and hiding contract magic. His property would be divided once he was caught, and society would finally feel some relief. Main was surprised that she and Shuji had managed to bring down Golded, even though he hadn't been captured yet. She didn't understand how they could succeed against someone protected by nobles. Shuji explained that not all nobles supported the moneylender. Some were even willing to help by giving useful information. He made it simple for Main to understand. Golded was backed by nobles who bought servants illegally, and this kind of trading could create serious problems for the country. However, the nobles were split into different groups that competed with each other, so they were often in conflict. Shuji sent a letter to the nobles who didn't support Golded. He included proof of the illegal contract. He had asked members of the Adventurers Guild, especially the quiet ones, to gather information on which nobles were helping Golded. Since outsiders couldn't meet with nobles without an introduction, and since Akina didn't want to get involved, Shuji found another way. He gave money to the guards of the noble's mansion and asked them to deliver the documents. Because of the power struggles between noble factions, many were glad to start an investigation against Golded. While Main was impressed by Shuji's knowledge and skills, he simply remembered how his old job on Earth had also involved dealing with rival groups. Now, only Golded was left, but there was no need to worry. His former allies were now forced to hunt him down to protect themselves. Shuji, having done his part, encouraged his partner to keep going and move on to a new city. Meanwhile, the former moneylender Golded was running out of breath as he rushed through the city's alleys, wondering how things had turned out this way. Even his own men had abandoned him. He blamed everything on Shuji. If it weren't for him, Main would have been his, and he had planned to use her to make money. Golded had even tried to stop Main from paying her debt, but one day Shuji showed up, paid the entire amount, fought off 2 attacks, and later sent guards to Golded's office. Luckily, Golded escaped using a secret passage in his room. As he remembered all of this, he swore he would get revenge. He wanted to kill Shuji and force Main to serve him. But first, he needed to escape the country. To do that, he needed a horse, and he was already thinking about stealing one. His thoughts were suddenly cut off when his body flipped forward and he hit the ground. Lying there, he realized he couldn't move or speak. Then a stranger walked up to him. The person said Golded's movements were sealed and that there was an order to kill him right away, without any questions or pain. Even though Golded tried to beg for his life, he couldn't even open his mouth. In the end, his life was taken without a single word. While Shuji was cleaning up the remains of a destroyed house on his land, Main came over and told him that they had visitors. At first, Shuji didn't recognize who they were, but then he realized they were Golded's former slaves. They said they were grateful to him and wanted to thank him properly. They bowed low to the ground and thanked him for saving them. One of them explained that because of Shuji, they were freed from slavery, and their debts had been erased. Shuji realized that the group attacking the nobles backing up Golded saw the slaves as victims, and had set them free instead without sending them back to the market. Even though things had been hard, the freed people were truly thankful. They didn't forget Shuji's help and felt they owed him a lot. Shuji asked if they had steady jobs afterward. Many sighed. Some could go back to their villages or find work with family, but not all of them had that option. Some were sold by their families and some had their villages destroyed. The rest seemed unsure and sad. Shuji realized another problem had appeared after their freedom. That said, he was not responsible for them, and he only attacked Golded to gain Main since she was profitable. He shouldn't shoulder someone else's burden. A moment later, Main pulled Shuji aside and asked him to help these people. He understood what she felt, but he couldn't afford to support so many people even if he tried to raise money. Main then suggested hiring them to work at Shuji's future shop. She said that he might own a shop or run trade caravans one day. Shuji thought about it seriously. If he wanted to grow as a merchant, he would need people to manage the selling of goods. After hearing Main's reasoning, Shuji realized that he hadn't been thinking like a leader. His years of working in an office had shaped the way he thought, and with that mindset, he couldn't keep chasing his dream. As Shuji thought about this, he noticed that the people around him were looking at him, waiting for an answer. Their eyes were filled with hope. Nervous from being the center of attention, he turned to face them and made an offer. He would give them jobs at his store. Shuji didn't care that they had once been servants. Respecting their wishes, Shuji agreed to count on them. After they accepted, they asked him to take care of them as their master. Shuji had now become a large merchant who employed over a dozen people. In this world, someone like that was called a master. The new workers were so happy that they promised to follow him for the rest of their lives. This surprised Shuji, and from then on, he had to keep it in mind whenever he hired someone. The next day, Shuji went to the capital and visited the workshop district. There he stopped by a blacksmith shop. When they met, the dwarf blacksmith told him that someone was targeting him. Shuji and his partner looked at the dwarf in shock after hearing the bad news. Another problem had come their way. At the forge on Workshop Street, Shuji learned he was being targeted because of his connection to gold and the Ganiller. Some people wanted to get rid of him, and even visited the gnome to gather any information they could. Akina arrived planning to fix her weapon and hire some of the former servants. But when she heard what was happening, she stayed to listen. After Golded was caught, the nobles who had been buying illegal servants were exposed. This caused a shift in power among them. Shuji guessed that some nobles had lost a lot and sent assassins after him, but he had no plans to die. The blacksmith told him to run away quickly. After saying goodbye, Akina and her partner left. Main then asked for forgiveness, feeling guilty about everything. Still, Shuji calmly talked to her about it. She was glad he could be open with her. Shuji suggested they leave the country sooner and start their own business. But Main wasn't sure what to do about the new workers they had hired. Escaping with a dozen people would be hard, and Shuji didn't know if he could find work for all of them in another country. Not wanting to take unnecessary risks, he decided to stick to their original plan. Later at the Merchant Guild, the former slaves arrived in a group to sign papers. Shuji and Main, wearing disguises, quietly watched. The new employees were being trained to work as store clerks, learning basic trading skills. Each person was given a role that matched their strengths. In the future, these workers would manage a local shop selling goods made by Shuji and grown overseas. Finally, Main and Akina found time to talk about where to escape. For now, they blended in as regular townspeople. After saying goodbye to the staff, they left the room. Main guessed that the border had already been alerted about their possible escape using communication magic. This surprised Shuji. He had underestimated how advanced this world was. He realized they had no choice but to leave the country. But escaping wasn't easy. Main explained that magic users at the border could track anyone trying to cross without going through an official checkpoint. However, tracking magic didn't cover the entire border, only flatlands and areas with shelters. Dangerous places weren't watched closely. Still, Main said it would be nearly impossible to send goods through those unsafe areas. Akina sighed. Escaping the country and arranging product shipments at the same time seemed impossible. Feeling stuck, Shuji thought about starting over, but he didn't want to abandon the people he had already hired. After thinking it over, Main suggested they head to the Forest of Dark Destruction. Shuji learned that the forest was very dangerous and full of monsters, but it didn't have any tracking magic. The forest was surrounded by different countries, but no one cut it down because doing so could create paths that might lead to invasion. The forest also gave off strange waves that weakened magic users. It was so big that its length matched the size of an entire country. Even though it was dangerous, Main still recommended it. She believed they could get through it because she trusted her own skills now. Though it was all thanks to Shuji providing her the weapons. Shuji agreed with her and didn't think she was showing off. In fact, he believed that her confidence was one of her strengths. Shuji thought that if they could make it through the forest, it would be easier to get supplies and pick which country to escape to. After understanding the situation, Shuji told Main they needed to plan an escape. But before that, they had to figure out how to get through the forest and what supplies they would need. He wondered what essentials should they prepare first. Main only thought of the most important thing. Later, Shuji and Main went to the royal capital's potion shop. Shuji noticed that Main acted more dependable when she had a goal in mind. As he entered the shop, he realized it was different from the one where he used to buy potions, and he felt curious about what he would find. While looking at the shelves and the people shopping, Shuji saw a woman picking up a potion. She looked calm and graceful. Main noticed Shuji staring and reminded him how to tell potions apart by their color. Blue would heal wounds, green would cure poison, and yellow could remove paralysis. The quality of a potion could also be seen through its clarity. Cheaper potions had some dirt or particles in them, while better ones were clear. But good potions were expensive, which was normal for items that get used up. Main offered to pick some good but affordable potions herself. Shuji interrupted her and suggested they buy a high-quality potion instead. He didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. He just looked at the potion's clearness and assumed that since they were heading into a dangerous forest, they should bring the best supplies. The next moment, Shuji walked up to the seller and asked to buy 10 pieces of each of the best potions. Everyone around him was surprised. Buying so many high-level potions at once usually meant the person was rich, even though Shuji didn't look wealthy at all. Some people thought Shuji was a slave of a nobleman running errands and kept watching him. Shuji realized that his actions were like those of a rich businessman on Earth who bought everything in a store. Then he looked at the woman he had seen earlier. She looked surprised too, then smiled at him. Shuji didn't know why, but something about that moment gave him a strange feeling, especially with Main looking unhappy nearby. Just then the sellers called out to him. They had finished preparing the potions. While checking them, Shuji noticed a strange-looking potion and asked what it was. The shopkeeper explained that it was a monster-repelling potion. If someone sprinkled it on a cart, the smell would keep monsters away. Even better, the effect would last for a whole week without any monster attacks. Shuji thought it was very useful. The woman from earlier reacted, but Main said she had never heard of a potion like that before. The seller quickly said a traveling mage had sold it to them and that the store had tested it. Each potion cost 10 gold coins, enough to hire several adventurers for a week. While others talked about how expensive it was, Shuji decided to buy some anyway because he liked the idea. Shuji asked how effective the potion was. The seller said the mage claimed it could keep away monsters up to B rank. Main explained that monsters at that level usually needed a team of skilled adventurers to fight them. So Shuji thought that if this potion could help, it might make things easier for Main in the forest. He wanted to find out the real market price. After that, he started bidding, saying he wanted to buy all the potions in stock if they would sell them to him for 6 gold coins each. Even though buying everything was surprising, 6 gold was too low. Main asked Shuji if he was really sure about buying everything. Shuji assumed they didn't have a lot due to the price. The seller pushed once more and agreed to sell the potions for 8 gold each. Shuji then asked her if she thought the product would become popular. She admitted that she didn't think they could sell the potions later. After hearing this, the seller asked them to wait and ran into another room in a panic. A few moments later, 2 people came back quickly. The store manager then told Shuji that if he bought all the potions, they could lower the price to 7 gold coins each. However, the total cost was 200 gold, including the other potions he bought. When converted to Earth money, it was several million yen, but Shuji thought the monster avoidance potion now had become cheaper. Everyone in the store went silent as they held their breath. Akina agreed to buy everything. The sellers were happy to get rid of the old stock and get their money back. Akina left 40 gold coins as a down payment and planned to pay the rest after the potions were delivered. When Akina went outside and started planning to grow the potions, he ran into the same woman again. This made Shuji wonder if she was following him, but she didn't look like one of their pursuers. However, Shuji noticed Main looking down. Main seemed upset, thinking Shuji had been staring at the other girl with long black hair and big breasts. To calm her down, Akina told her to go home and check some things together. This helped improve her mood. As he thought about the dangerous dark forest of destruction, he got an idea thanks to the monster protection potion. Sometime later, he stood near the body of a huge snake. Main stood on top of it and asked if he was serious about living in such a dangerous place. Shuji believed that if they used the potion alongside Main's power, they wouldn't have to run away. He then decided that the dark forest would become their new main base. Thinking back to how it all happened, Shuji remembered the girl's question about living there. A few days earlier, on the second day in the dark forest, Shuji got tired and sat down on the roots of a big tree. Seeing how tired he was, his partner suggested they start training. She didn't consider that she had superhuman strength. The girl also noticed how quiet the forest was, which was strange since monsters usually attacked right away. That silence proved that the monster protection potion was working. The purchase had been worth it. The monsters ran away as soon as they saw the potion start to evaporate. Shuji began to believe the stories he had heard about the potion that protected people from monsters. That was why, before they entered the forest, the man had said they could escape their enemies by going through the dark forest of destruction. After buying the potion, Shuji quickly decided to build a base inside the forest. This made Main ask why he had chosen such a dangerous place. Shuji explained that even if they ran to another country, they might not be safe there either. Also, no one had followed them into the forest. At that time, Main was busy with a task. She was attaching something to the trunk of a tree. She set up a weapon because even with the potion, they still faced danger. She asked what Shuji was even making her do. Shuji mentioned how they still had problems despite having the monster avoidance potion. Suddenly, loud noises got nearer. Main then realized he was talking about the monster that was quickly approaching them. It was a high-rank monster, known as the King of the Forest of Destruction, a huge snake carrying the bodies of forest bears in its mouth. The bear-like monster had only been prey for the giant snake. Before entering the forest, Shuji had studied information about the forest. He had also checked their gear. He made Main carry a mithril sword made by the dwarf, and Shuji also wore light armor that protected his weak spots. Main had just finished her preparations. Since staying safe in the forest was their top priority, Shuji believed that defeating the Forest King would be a big step forward for them. But Main didn't understand why he thought beating the snake would make the forest safe, especially when they hadn't even chosen a proper base yet. Shuji had only said that the monster had to be defeated first. While they were talking, the snake appeared behind them, ready to strike. Shuji had expected it to show up, just not this soon. In the next moment, the snake attacked the two. Main defended herself, but her sword broke during the clash. She quickly switched to a stronger weapon. Taking a fighting stance, she pointed her blade at the monster. Leaves fell around them as Main and the snake stared each other down. Then both of them started moving, crashing through trees as they chased each other. Main landed a hit on the snake and followed with another attack, but this only made the creature angrier. It lunged at her, but she dodged just in time, though Shuji was clearly worried. The monster's next attack was a fog of poison, something Shuji had already known the snake could do. At that moment, Main couldn't get close enough to attack. Seeing how hopeless the situation was, Shuji pulled the cord, believing the snake's position and speed were just right. At the same time, the girl looked back and finally understood what they had been setting up all this time. The cord dragged a large number of potion boxes, each one spilling its contents onto the snake. Not long ago, Shuji and Main had set up this trap using potions that protected against monsters. The girl had been surprised by how many potions there were, but Shuji told her he had bought more. According to the potion's ingredients, monsters feared poison. Even a strong monster ranked A would stop moving if covered in poison. Once it couldn't move, it became easy to attack. When Akina gave the signal, Main pulled trees from the ground. Holding one in each hand, she ran toward the monster, shaking with fear. Main had trapped the snake behind trees, preventing it to move. She saw a chance and charged. But in the next second, the snake broke free from the trap and struck at Main. It wrapped its tail around her while Shuji watched, worried for his partner. The monster's skin released slime, and small snakes crawled out of its tail, slipping under the girl's clothes. Main didn't let herself get bitten. She broke free from the snake's grip, surprising even Shuji. She said she was a guard for the rich merchant Shuji, and this was just the beginning of their journey. Their new business and adventure were just starting, and the snake was their first stepping stone. Jumping back into the fight, Main promised to turn the monster into rust. She cut it into pieces, giving it no chance to survive. Standing over the defeated monster, Shuji saw her true strength and finally understood why Golded wanted her. He decided to give her a bonus, and she was happy about it. That was exactly what happened. When asked about living in that place, Shuji explained that he had been quietly checking how strong his partner was and how well the potions worked. He did this in secret so the girl wouldn't get nervous, and he left out the part about the trap. In the end, Main was able to fight off the monster. The snake's lair was a large area, and because of the monster's power and smell, other creatures stayed away. That's why, after winning the battle, they decided to turn the place into their new base. All they needed to do was bring a carriage and set up an office. The next thing that Shuji and Main had to do in the Forest of Dark Destruction was to build an office. Main did most of the work, but Shuji helped by hammering nails and fitting pieces of wood together. They started by leveling the ground. Main prepared the land carefully using a single log to flatten the space. After that, they worked on the foundation. Main threw the support beams into place with ease, and Shuji attached the logs one by one. Main finished putting up the main structure quickly, and after a while, Shuji added the final touches. Shuji and Main stood back and looked at the house from a distance. The office was finished. It looked great, especially for their first try. Shuji's interest in log houses, which he still remembered from earlier days, helped a lot. Even though a few small areas still needed work, Shuji wasn't too worried. He hadn't heard about any earthquakes in the area, so he believed the house would be safe. Behind one of the doors was the most important part of the site, the growing field. A fence was built around it so Shuji could work there in peace. Not even Main was allowed to disturb him. He planned to make more monster avoidance potions and especially mithril swords, as their supply had run out. When Main entered the house, she was happy to finally have her own room. Only wealthy merchants or nobles usually had that kind of space. Shuji said they could buy decorations for their rooms on their next trip to the city. Main liked the idea. Shuji also noticed the house was decorated with bones from a large snake. Main said she had done it on purpose, to scare away monsters. Shuji realized that the bones were a way to show that the land had an owner. Then Main asked Shuji a question that surprised him. She brought up the way he spoke. He didn't understand the issue at first, but she explained that, as his teammate, she wanted him to talk more casual, like he did with the blacksmith. She also said she would feel more comfortable if they spoke more casually with each other. She quickly apologized, saying it wasn't her place to ask for such a thing as just a guard. But Shuji took it seriously. He thought she was right. His polite way of speaking might have created distance between them. After thinking it over, he agreed and changed how he spoke. This made Main feel a bit shy. As they restarted their partnership in a more friendly way, Shuji realized their relationship had entered a new stage. But then he began to shake. Main was crushing his hands. She quickly let go and apologized. Shuji was glad that he just bought high-quality potions. A month later, Shuji and Main were getting ready to return to the store, which they had left in the care of their new workers who stayed in the city. But Main didn't want to leave the peaceful time they had spent alone. Still, Shuji explained that one of the workers, Oguma, had already gone to the forest and reported that there were no signs of anyone following them. So, Shuji believed that their pursuers had finally given up. Over the past month, he had used his cultivation skill to grow and produce many goods, increasing their supplies. They also had to return to the city because they were running out of money to pay their workers. The forest had only been a temporary base, so it was time to go back and continue their business. Later, they met Oguma and the other staff, who led them to the store building. The outside of their new store looked clean and well-made. Shuji said the building looked neat and he was invited to look inside as well. When he stepped inside, he discovered a tidy room with neatly dressed workers. He and Main were impressed by what they saw. The workers welcomed Shuji as their master, which made him feel a bit awkward. He thanked them for their work and told them to continue working, since everyone seemed nervous about the surprise visit. He also said the store looked great, and both he and Main truly liked it. However, Shuji became curious about the cost of the store. Since it was on a busy main street in a good location and looked new, he thought it might have been very expensive. Oguma then gave them a quick tour and explained that even though the outside looked nice, many parts inside were still old and worn down. The outside was just covered with thin boards to make it look better for customers. Oguma added that for a regular person to own a large fancy building, they would need a special permit. Shuji didn't know much at first. To get the store, they needed a valid reason, a large amount of money, and trust. Things that were hard to earn in the city. Doing business in the city market required long-term support from powerful people. That's why they were only able to buy a small, rundown shop. Since the building was very old, the first thing the workers did was clean it up and make it look better. This way, they could tell the authorities that they hadn't rebuilt it, only fixed it up. Oguma and the others did a great job, and Shuji noticed their effort. He felt that hiring them, as Main suggested, was the right choice. The workers also rented a small house nearby, just as Shuji had asked. In the past, servants never expected to live in proper housing, so this was a nice change for them. Oguma had some concerns. He wasn't sure if it was okay for them to take 2 days off each week, but Shuji encouraged it, wanting them to rest and have free time. Even though Oguma wasn't used to such conditions, Shuji explained that they would also be paid for working extra hours. Shuji made this choice because on regular land, unpaid work and long hours were normal. But he wanted their store to be a better place to work. The employees were truly thankful. Shuji then asked when the store would open. The sellers had finished their training, and once the goods arrived, they could start. One worker said she had been a general manager before, so Shuji trusted her and let her take charge. He and his partner were happy with how things were going. After that, Akina gave the order to unload the goods and choose the first ones to sell. Joji asked about the price list he had requested from the royal capital. The workers explained they could only gather prices from stores they were allowed to enter. Some stores sold only to nobles or specialized buyers like carpenters. Shuji told them to keep tracking price changes in the same way. He started thinking about what their first product should be. He also asked them to prepare several carriages to move goods closer to the dark forest of destruction. With a deep breath, Shuji felt pleased that everything was going well with the start of his newly opened business. A week later, one of Shuji's employees came to him looking excited. The store was almost ready to open, but something unusual had happened. Someone had come to see Shuji. Akina didn't know who it was. Even though he was still hiding, he thought it might be someone chasing him. He believed they had already lost his trail, but he couldn't be sure. Oguma then explained that the visitor was a woman who said she wouldn't leave until she met the store owner. This meant she likely knew how the boy felt about the store. Oguma also said the woman called herself Sasha, a name that sounded familiar to Main. She was known as an adventurer and a researcher of magical items. Still, Shuji didn't understand why someone so well known would come looking for him, so he quickly went to meet her. When Akina walked into the store and saw the tall woman, he recognized her right away. She was the same person they had met before at the potion shop. Now she was there to thank them for the tea. 2 weeks ago, Main and Shuji sat inside a hut. Main was lighting a magic lamp and showed it to the man. The lamp gave off light without using oil. Akina was surprised. He thought that maybe Ogum had brought this strange item along with the report he delivered. It was the first time Akina had seen anything like it. As he remembered, similar magical items had appeared during Golded's attack and the summoning. Main broke his thoughts by explaining that in the royal capital, shops were now selling these lamps and they had become very popular. She also said that magical items were usually expensive and hard to make. Shuji held up the lamp and thought it would be great if their store had someone who could make things like this. Still, he knew that finding the right person wouldn't be easy. He fixed his collar and kept that thought in mind. Soon, he entered Akina's room, greeted him, and apologized for being late, saying he had just changed clothes. Akina and Main sat across from the woman they had met earlier at the potion shop. After that, Oguma left the room. The woman was named Sasha, a known researcher of magical items. She noticed that her name was becoming more recognized. Shuji introduced himself as Akina Shoji, the store owner. This surprised Sasha. She hadn't expected him to be the shop owner after seeing him in the potion shop she visited before. Still, she thought it was a lucky coincidence. She repeated her name and explained that she was a mage who studied magical items. From her appearance alone, Akina had already guessed she was involved in that kind of work. He thought she looked a bit suspicious, and depending on what happened, Main might step in. Shuji asked why she wanted to meet. Sasha said she wanted to show them something. Then she lifted her skirt slightly and stretched out her leg. From under it, she took out a bundle. He noticed how she got some nice legs, but Shuji kept his eyes closed, trying to stay calm. He wondered why she hid it there in the first place, while Main coughed in annoyance. Sasha opened the bundle. Inside were several objects. Shuji and Main looked at them with interest. Sasha picked up a jug, pointed the open end at them, and pressed a button. A glowing magic circle formed around it, and water poured out. Shuji and Main jumped up from their seats in surprise. Shuji started to panic since the floor was getting flooded, and Main asked if the item was magical. Sasha stayed calm and confirmed that it was a magic item. She explained that pressing the switch allowed even non-magic users to use the device. She exclaimed these were something she got after excavating some ancient ruins and were lost magia's magic items. A second magic circle appeared, and this time, flame came out. Shuji was amazed but was more worried about the floor burning. Sasha held her staff above her head and explained that lost magic was different from modern magic. She said that long ago there was a highly advanced magical civilization unlike today. Back then, many things were done with the help of magic items, which made their lives easier and more developed. Sasha touched another item and said that ancient magic tools had parts that couldn't be made today. People today couldn't recreate the same items. She picked it up and said that this one could make a small amount of wind magic, even though it was weaker. Then she pressed the button again. As soon as she did, Shuji and Main were thrown back and hit the wall. They lay on the floor amazed as the water started to dry up. They stood up again, and Main said that with power like that, it would be easy to defeat bandits, but such item could be worth several hundreds of gold coins. Shuji asked if Sasha planned to sell it to him. She shook her head and said that the built-in magic stones were already used up, so the item couldn't work anymore. She showed this by pressing the button again. Nothing happened. Her analysis was done, so the items were now useless. Main had a hard time believing it, especially since the items seemed so valuable. Shuji stood silently. He thought Sasha had just made a bold product presentation. He put his hand on his chin and began to think. Sasha had brought some disposable magic items with her because she wanted to do some business talks. Sasha said she had already studied the magic items. She explained that she could fix them and make them work again. The others asked what she meant. Sasha showed a magic staff and explained that these items came from lost magia, which was considered the highest form of magical technology. Even now, many researchers still couldn't fully understand or repair them. Sasha said she planned to study all the lost magic and create something even better. Her real reason for coming was to ask Shuji to support her research financially. Shuji asked why she didn't just sell her research to the country. Sasha said that public institutions were already controlled by magicians of the country. Shuji then asked why she didn't sell her work to a private noble instead. Sasha explained that most nobles were only interested in things other than research. Shuji couldn't help but agree. He thought Sasha was very beautiful and attractive. Compared to Main, she was much more developed. Just thinking about that made him feel Main's murderous aura behind him. Shuji then asked why she picked him. There were many other big shop owners, yet she chose him, even though his business hadn't officially started yet. Sasha reached into her chest area and pulled something out between her cleavage. Shuji wondered why she kept something there. The group was shocked to see a monster avoidance potion. Sasha held it and explained that she made it using an old recipe she found while exploring the Legia ruins. Shuji finally realized what the potion was. Main turned to Shuji and said that the Legia ruins were very dangerous, even for skilled adventurers. Sasha added that exploring ruins cost a lot of money, and the potion ingredients were rare and expensive. Akina also mentioned that potion sales had been low. Because of the high costs and low sales, Sasha had almost given up. But when someone bought the potion, she felt hopeful. Maybe that person would understand and support her research. Shuji sat in deep thought. He realized that Sasha had sold the monster avoidance potion in that store to find a sponsor, and he seemed to fit what she was looking for. He seriously thought about the funding her research. Main and Shuji sat quietly. Right now, Shuji's main goal was to become a free trader in this world. So far, he got his cultivation skill, a store, and a guard, which helped him expand his business. He also recalled his cultivation skill's only weakness was it can only increase items that were completed. In other words, he currently had a factory but no research and development division. As for escorting, only Main can protect him. Shuji looked at Sasha. She was a magic item researcher and a mage who could explore dangerous ruins. Even though she acted a little strange, she seemed like a rare and well-suited person for the job. His eyes brightened. He realized this wasn't just a talk about money, it was about finding the right person to work with. Still, he wasn't sure if Sasha was really skilled or just pretending. He decided to stay cautious and take the talk seriously from now on. Shuji then asked what their advantage was in funding her research. Main looked surprised. Shuji believed that showing their strength would help convince Sasha to join his store. Sasha listed their advantages. First, she could make magic items. She could also restore them. The cost of tools, materials, and upgrades added up to 2,000 gold coins. That was equal to about 20 million yen in Japanese money. Shuji thought about it for a moment, then called Oguma. Oguma came in, handed him a bag, and Shuji took out 1,000 gold coins. He said he was ready to give this amount now as research funding. When the finished items were ready, he would pay the remaining 1,000 gold coins. Sasha looked shocked and asked if he was really okay with giving that much money. Shuji answered that it wasn't a problem. With his cultivation skill, he could just grow the restored items. Sasha said it was bold to pay so much right away. Shuji then asked if she could accept more funding if he became her sponsor. But he had one condition. He said he wanted her to work at his store. Her job would include making magic items to sell and guarding him as the owner. She could also use her time for research. First, though, she would need to take a test to see how well she could guard the store over several days. Sasha thought about it and agreed. She said working at Shuji's store would let her focus on her research instead of risking her life in ruins just to earn money. She shook Shuji's hand and accepted the condition. She asked if she had to pass the security test first. Shuji smiled and said he looked forward to it. A few days later, near the edge of the dark forest of destruction, Shuji, Main, and Sasha stood on the road with their carriage behind them. Shuji remembered that other workers had asked him to check out a nearby village to see if it was good for business. They also wanted to test if Sasha could handle a fight as a guard. Suddenly, they heard strange noises coming closer. Shuji guessed what it was. He had recently heard that monsters had attacked the village. Moments later, he saw what was making the noise. It was a pack of wild horses running toward them, crying out loudly. Shuji reached out to Sasha, saying he would rely on sensei. Sasha agreed and asked if he meant her when he said sensei. Shuji thought to himself that it was just a common way of speaking. He also remembered that Sasha was more of a researcher. As a magician, she was somewhat strong, which was good enough for now. Shuji quietly asked her how strong the wild horses were. Main looked nervous. She explained that the horses were vicious monsters that used their large hooves to crush their prey. On their own, they were rated as C-ranked monsters. But because they were fast and hard to escape from or catch, they were more dangerous in open spaces like this one. That made them more like B-ranked monsters. Shuji realized these horses were about as strong as the forest bears Main had defeated before. Sasha stepped forward without fear. This was the first time Shuji would see a mage fight, and it seemed like it would be something special. She formed a magic circle with a star in the center. She said it was time to show her research. Then, many more magic circles appeared around her, each with different shapes inside. Main moved behind Shuji, and they both noticed that the air had suddenly turned cold. Sasha crossed her arms and told them the horses would become frozen. She waved her hands toward the animals and summoned a fountain of ice, gathering all the magic circles into one large one. The others watched with amazement. The ice spread across the ground and stopped the horses in their tracks, but the animals, showing unexpected intelligence, tried to jump over the frozen surface at high speed. Sasha explained that with Shuji's funding, she had quickly fixed an old magical item that had been broken during an excavation. She lifted her dress, and a pole-shaped magical object dropped out. When she picked it up, it caught fire. She began to spin the pole. After saying a phrase, "Remagic item Ice Hell Princess," the ground started freezing even faster. The horses froze in place, unable to move. Shuji noticed how much quicker the ice spread and was surprised. The monsters slipped and crashed to the ground. They couldn't stand back up and made loud noises as they fell. Sasha looked proud and asked the others what they thought of her restored magic item. Shuji was surprised she could already repair such things, while Mane spoke with admiration about how well she combined magic with a tool. However, she hadn't finished yet. When she saw the wanderer horses running away, she made another magic circle. She said it was useless for them to escape and called them ponies. Then she opened her arms and said it was time to end the show. The others shouted that the air had turned really cold. Sasha lowered her hands, then quickly raised them again. A bunch of magic circles appeared around her. The boys stared at them with wide eyes and open mouths. Sasha used a spell that created homing ice arrows. Sharp ice arrows appeared in the center of each magic circle. Mane and Shuji watched closely, curious about what would happen next. The horses started to panic. Sasha raised her hands again and pointed toward the horses. She gave the command and all the arrows flew straight at the animals. The horses ran fast and Shuji thought they would escape, but Mane told him to look ahead. Suddenly, ice formed on the ground in front of the horses. They slipped and fell. The boys felt nervous and the horses were clearly terrified. The ice arrows hit the animals one after another. The horses cried out in pain but were quickly defeated. Sasha stood tall, proud of what she had done. Shuji remembered that Mane had once said fighting in open spaces was difficult. Sasha quietly mentioned that these monsters were acting strange and their numbers were unusual. Shuji realized she had shifted into researcher mode. He had heard stories about Sasha, the magical item researcher. She turned to Shuji and asked if she had passed the job test. He said of course she had. Then she smiled and said it was nice to finally meet her future boss's son. She stood on top of the hill as the sun shone on her. Shuji looked at her and thought she might be another great worker for the Akina store. Meanwhile, Mane started to panic. She now had a rival. A week had passed since Sasha started working at Akina's shop in the royal capital. One day, Shuji and Mane watched as she showed them a new spell. She held a staff with a ball on the end and cast the spell. A magic circle appeared above the staff and it spewed out flames. Sasha looked pleased. The others watched closely. Sasha giggled and said she had only been able to study this staff because of the money Shuji gave her. She mentioned needing more funds and Shuji agreed, saying he didn't expect her to fix something with lost magic right away. Sasha explained that she had bought a stone to restore the pattern on the staff, but its maximum usage still hadn't improved beyond 6 times. She said she wanted to create something better than any lost magic item. Mane told her that what she had done was already impressive. Then Sasha stretched out her leg and said she wanted to add a new product to the shop. She showed them a lantern. Mane asked if it was another magical item. Sasha said yes and explained that she used old magic technology to make it even better than normal lanterns. Shuji was surprised. Mane pointed out that in just 1 week, Sasha had repaired the fire staff and also made a brand new item. Sasha pressed a button on the magic lantern and it lit up. The others were amazed. Sasha wanted to compare it to the ones sold in the city, so she returned the earlier version to their store in the capital. When Shuji asked how many she had, Sasha opened a cloth cover showing 10 more lanterns. She said Oguma and others helped her. Sasha explained that only she could restore items with lost magic, and once she made the energy and core, the rest was easy to manufacture. Shuji was glad the development team could make these items so quickly, and realized that they can continue with their business. They decided to go to a village near the Forest of Dark Destruction to start selling right away. Shuji thought to himself that the village was far from the capital. It had no shops and only a few people. Most worked as guides. They had learned about the village's needs by asking Oguma and the others to survey it in advance. When they arrived, a man came up and introduced himself as the village chief. He thanked them for defeating the wanderer horses. Shuji already knew the village had been attacked before, but lately monsters had started showing up, even though the forest was supposed to be far enough to keep them safe. The elder said the attacks had stopped, but Shuji noticed the villagers still looked scared, especially at night when it was the darkest. He told the chief that they were from a store called Akina's store. The elder was surprised. Shuji pointed to their carriage and said they wanted to sell in their village. After the village chief spoke, he said he would try to make a deal with them. Behind him stood another man who asked if they had anything rare from the city. The man replied that they were renting a small corner. His plan was to sell useful items that people needed. In this village, they planned to sell lanterns designed by Sasha. Since the country was facing a food shortage, they decided to start with cheaper items as they usually did. They set out their goods, and soon people began to ask about the prices. Many said the items were cheaper than those sold in the capital during their travels. They sold the usual things, and before long, the man thought it was time to start selling the lanterns. But then, a few new people arrived. They were also merchants. They greeted the village and asked if they could also sell their goods. Shoji asked who they were. The two merchants smiled and each held a lantern. One said their lanterns brought light to the dark world. The other removed the cover from his lantern and added that light helped everything, even plants and trees. Both merchants then introduced themselves as part of the Grigori Magic Lantern Shop. Main told Shuji that this shop was their rival. Shuji remembered that Main had shown him some lantern shops from the royal capital not long ago. One of the Grigori sellers began calling out to the villagers. He said they had seen a monster on the way to the village, which surprised Main. But Shuji knew this was a lie because they had already used Sasha's monster-repelling potion on their way there. The merchant continued talking, saying he had also been afraid. He warned the villagers that the sun was about to set and that monsters might attack in the dark. He tried to scare them, saying these monsters looked like normal people but would suddenly scream and attack. Shuji couldn't understand why the merchant was scaring people instead of just selling products where there was real demand. The merchant then held up a lantern and claimed it was the newest magic lantern from Grigori. He told the villagers they needed it to light up the area. It felt like he was forcing people to buy out of fear. Sasha calmly sipped her tea while Shuji realized they were using an unfair and forbidden method to sell their goods. Then Main shouted that they shouldn't buy anything from that store. The merchants looked at them with confusion and walked over. They said their shop also sold magic lanterns. After seeing the lanterns, the second merchant asked about the group's strange uniform and claimed it was nothing compared to the better-looking one made by someone like him. One of the group asked if the merchants really thought they were the same. The merchant loudly introduced himself as Professor Gridge. He said he could make anything and called himself a genius who created magical tools. The other merchant joined in, saying he would sell no matter what. He introduced himself as Gorage, the manager of the store. They claimed they would make profits even at the end of the world. Shuji started to feel a bit uneasy by how persistent they were. He wondered if they had done something wrong or if they were just bothering people. The second merchant insulted their lanterns, saying they looked like they were made from horse bones and were too weak to sell. Main didn't like how they acted. Shuji told the merchants that they wouldn't know if the lanterns would sell unless they tried. Main then asked Sasha to get involved, but Sasha was chilling under a parasol. Main said out loud that Sasha was really sleeping and mentioned that she did this often. Main began to worry a bit since Sasha's job was to help create tools and protect them, yet she only seemed interested in research. Sasha stayed asleep, even letting out small snores. The merchants started to take interest in the group. They noticed how calm and confident Shuji was. They then offered a challenge to compare both lanterns and see which one people would want to buy. Main didn't fully understand what was going on, but Shuji thought the challenge sounded fun. Sasha stayed asleep. The merchants claimed their lanterns were top-quality magical tools with very bright light. They also said they were worth the price. Shuji accepted the challenge. A crowd began to gather around them, excited to see what would happen next. Night had already fallen in the village. When it did, the village chief asked everyone to turn on their lanterns for comparison. Shoji and a merchant placed their lanterns on the table and decided to test which one was brighter. They both pressed the buttons on their lanterns, and to everyone's surprise, both lanterns shone very brightly. The villagers said the brightness looked the same and that either one would be helpful at night. Sasha, who had been asleep, started to yawn, and Shoji noticed her. Next, they compared the prices. The merchant said his lantern cost 1 gold coin. Without hesitation, Shoji said theirs cost 2 gold coins. He and the others explained that their lantern used expensive materials and wasn't made in large numbers, which made it cost more. The merchants began to feel confident. Since both lanterns were equally bright, they believed people would pick the cheaper one. Shuji listened to their comments with a grin while Main tried to wake Sasha. Shuji knew brightness was important for a lantern. If both were equally bright, then price did matter. However, thanks to his cultivation skill, he knew he could make the lanterns in large numbers at a low cost. But he didn't want to lower the price too much because Sasha's invention might become something the village relied on in the future. He also thought the merchant's method was too simple. Their product was good, but Sasha's magic item had something special. Even if it cost more, it was worth it. Sasha finally stood up, and Main looked happy to see her awake. Sasha picked up the lantern and asked Shoji to hold her glasses. She explained that there was one more feature the lantern had which she hadn't mentioned earlier. There was another button at the bottom of the lantern. When she pressed it, the light turned off for a moment. No one knew what to expect. Then a new kind of light began to shine from the lantern. It spread across the area like water spilling everywhere. The light reached the darkest corners, and soon everything around them was glowing. People stared in shock, unable to look away. The brightness was amazing. The crowd quickly surrounded them, eager to get one, even if it cost more. The merchants fell to the ground, stunned by the crowd's reaction, unable to believe what they were seeing. Shoji walked up to them and said the result was clear. Sasha smiled and said their lantern was the best of its time. She explained that it used lost magic from ancient times and even kept monsters away. The merchants were shocked when they heard about the lost magic, but Shuji told them to look at the villagers waving their hands. The villagers didn't just want light, they wanted light that made them feel safe. Sasha's lantern gave that feeling. The merchants, frustrated, admitted defeat and ran away. Shuji, Main and the others just watched them go. The villagers gathered around Sasha, praising her invention and calling it the best. Shuji looked at her and thought she always seemed focused only on research, but maybe there was more to her. Sasha turned away from the crowd and said she still wasn't satisfied with what she had created. The day after the lantern competition, Shuji and the others were getting ready to leave the village. Main was loading the supplies onto the cart. Shuji apologized for calling over Oguma to pick up the goods. Oguma replied that it wasn't a big deal. Shuji thought back to the previous day and mentioned that Sasha's new product had turned out really well. Main agreed and mumbled how Sasha had overpowered her. However, she promised to work harder as a saleslady and a bodyguard. Shuji didn't catch what she said. Just then, Sasha stepped in front of Shuji and said she would also try doing escorting work on the way back. But before heading home, she wanted to stop by and do some shopping for research. Main looked surprised. Shuji asked Sasha to protect Aguma and the others instead, as they would go directly back to the capital since he and Main had something else to do. Main couldn't believe it and felt happy. Later, Shuji and Main arrived at their small cabin in the woods. Shuji noticed the girl was acting differently and asked what was wrong. Main blushed and mentioned how he chose her over Sasha as his bodyguard, yet he was being nonchalant with just the two of them. Shuji then told her that he had something to do out in the field and asked her to fetch water from the reservoir. She was shocked when he actually went to the field and paid no attention to her at all. Before going into the field, Shoji thought about how Sasha had now become a comrade. This meant a lot to him and it gave him another reason to keep trading. When he entered the field, he saw many magic staffs sticking out of the ground. This was part of the next part of his trading process. He looked at what he had grown and felt pleased. These were grown from the staff that had special lost magic from Sasha. Because of that, he had managed to grow a very rare magic item. He grabbed one of the staff members from the ground and quickly realized that it worked like items in a game. It was like a bug that made it possible to multiply valuable items. This idea excited him. There was even a button on the staff that could activate magic. Shuji thought it would be fun to try it at least once to see how it worked. Suddenly, he heard something nearby. The field also began to crackle and move. He started to feel nervous. He checked behind him to see what was happening and saw a huge bear-like monster. It had 6 strong arms that just tore apart the wall. Shuji stopped in place, frozen. The monster stood right in front of him and stared. He felt completely scared seeing an extremely dangerous-looking monster appear. He looked around for Main but then remembered he had asked her to get some water. Realizing he still had the magic item in his hand, he decided to use it. The beast roared and charged at him. Shuji fell to the ground and quickly pressed the button on the magic staff. The place where the monster stood was suddenly hit with a strong magical blast. Shuji felt a bit relieved. It worked. With this item, even he could fight. But the monster didn't stop. It kept coming toward him. In a panic, Shuji pressed the button again and again, hoping the explosions would stop the creature. But the monster was quick and dodged each blast. Eventually, the staff stopped working. At first, Shuji didn't understand why. Then he remembered this magic item was disposable. He turned to run, but a root caught his leg and he fell. While on the ground, he cursed his bad luck, then noticed a root coming out of the soil. He realized he could use it. He pulled the root and the magic staffs came out from the ground. The monster was getting closer and Shoji had little time. He grabbed 2 more magic staffs and used them at the same time. Smoke filled the air. The monster came out of the smoke and saw Shoji still pressing buttons, trying his best. Eventually, the magic staffs finally reached their limit. The creature raised its paw to strike, but the monster suddenly collapsed. Shoji looked at the now lifeless creature and realized he had beaten it without using a sword or magic. He shouted from the top of his lungs as a celebration. Main knocked on the garden door and asked if everything was okay. Shoji opened the door and told her that he was fine. Main stepped inside looking worried. She said she had gotten concerned when she heard a loud noise after coming back. She asked again if it was alright to come in because Shuji had once told her not to enter the fields. When Main saw the burnt creature, she realized it was a forest demon, a demon bear. This kind of monster was known for being very dangerous. It had 6 strong arms that could tear apart metal armor, and its thick fur was tough enough to block an axe. It was the kind of monster ranked as A-class. Shuji stood near the defeated monster, feeling proud that he had beaten such a powerful enemy. Main, surprised, asked how he managed to do it. Shuji explained that he used a magic item he had gotten earlier. Main didn't know about this item, but it had fire magic. She was excited and happy that Shuji had a magical tool strong enough to beat a demon bear. Shuji told her that the magic item could only be used once. Main noticed a staff that he was trying to hide behind his back and said she had seen it somewhere before. Shuji quickly changed the topic. He said the food smelled great and offered her a piece of the fried demon bear. Main smiled and agreed to try it since she had gotten hungry from carrying water. Shuji was glad everything turned out well. But deep inside, he was surprised. He didn't even know that monsters like that could be eaten. They cut a piece of meat and roasted it over a fire while sitting across from each other. A lot had happened to Shoji, and he slowly started to understand the power he had gained after hiring Sasha. He now had magic strong enough to kill wanderer horses and the skills of a magic item maker who could create working products very quickly. Because of Sasha, the strength of both the security team and the trading group would grow even more from that point on. While he was deep in thought, Main broke the silence. She said that monsters usually stayed away from the nests of great serpents since those were their natural enemies. She couldn't figure out why a demonic bear would go into such a place. Shoji thought about it and realized the bear might have been acting strangely. Then he remembered the wanderer horses, which had recently started attacking the village. All of this made him feel uneasy, like something dangerous was about to happen. When Main and Shuji returned to the shop, they heard someone saying sorry for suddenly calling them over. Maud walked up to them. When they asked what was going on, Maud told Shuji he needed iron. At first, Shuji didn't understand what kind of iron he meant, but Maud said it was for something that would help everyone. That's when Shuji realized this could be a great business opportunity. Maud placed an iron ingot on the table and asked Shuji if he could find a large amount of iron. Main looked at the metal with interest, while Shuji only said that Maud had suddenly called him over. Maud explained that he had once left the country but still returned now and then. He said that didn't really matter. What was important was that he first wanted to check if Shuji was doing well and if he had more people working with him. Maud picked up a long cigar and began talking again. He said he had brought many broken mythal swords before and now wanted to ask Shuji for help. It turned out that Maud had recently been asked to make a lot of weapons, but he didn't have enough iron. Shuji asked why Maud wanted him to collect the iron. The old man confirmed his guess and asked if he could handle it. Shuji thought about it, knowing that collecting the right material would require using his cultivation skills. Maud showed them a wooden box and said that he needed at least 50 of those boxes filled with iron. He added that more would be even better. He asked for the delivery to be done within 2 weeks and the iron had to be as pure as the sample he had shown. Shoji asked to borrow some sample pieces. He said he didn't know much about the quality of iron Maud's business partner was looking for. He couldn't really tell him that he needed them so that he could use his cultivation skill efficiently. Maud didn't hesitate and handed over several samples. Shoji then asked another question. He wanted to know why Maud suddenly needed so many weapons. But Maud didn't answer. He just smirked and smoked in silence. Shoji figured it was still a secret. Maybe it had something to do with an old way of thinking, like in the Middle Ages. In modern Japan, clients like this were difficult to deal with because they didn't give clear instructions. But since it was Shoji's shop, he could choose whether or not to take the job. His shop was already running with a full team of sellers, guards, and even a research group. He had now stepped fully into the world of business in this wild land. He placed his hand on his chest and said he would accept the task. He felt curious and excited, so he took on the challenge. Maud then left. Later, at Shoji's shop, he gathered all the workers and made an announcement. He told them this was their first big job since the Akina company had opened, and they all needed to work together to make the most of this opportunity. Shoji explained that he had found a way to buy a large amount of iron from merchants near the Dark Forest of Destruction. Although the iron was cheap, the biggest problem was how to transport it all the way to the royal capital, which was very far. To solve this, 3 important things had to be arranged. First, they needed several wagons to carry the heavy load of iron. Second, they needed guards to protect the wagons during the long trip. Third, they had to find a city along the way where the group could rest before reaching the royal capital. Shuji gave the job of preparing the wagons to the team in charge of delivering materials. The team agreed right away and promised they would handle everything. Regarding the security, he said that Main would be with her and he was going to entrust the other carts to Sasha, but she got ahead of him and said that she would try to make it more comfortable with the help of monster avoidance potions. And regarding the city where they could have a rest, he said that he had already a town in mind. And so they set off on their journey with the whole team. Shoji's group arrived in a new town and looked for a place to set up a relay station for the Akina company. Shoji explained that they wanted to sell Akina company's products, which were already popular even in the royal capital. He noticed that the locals seemed unsure about letting in strangers, but he assured them he had come prepared for this. After some thinking, the people of the city agreed to the idea but warned them that their townspeople could be quite picky. They were not sure if they could handle everyone's expectations. Shoji calmly told them not to worry because all their employees had received proper training. Main, who was the leader of the team and considered the best employee, asked if the staff were ready. She believed they had already built strong sales skills. The workers felt thankful for all the training they had received from her. Main introduced herself as their sales drill sergeant. She reminded them that they had gone through her tough lessons and had grown stronger and more capable. She encouraged them to take a day off if they ever felt tired, on top of the paid vacation days they were already given. She also assured them that they would earn fair pay for their hard work. Shuji previously shared a famous joke from Earth about employees' training and tied it into her training methods. Because of this, many people came to respect and admire Main. After the store's goods were arranged, all the employees got serious and waited for the signal to begin. Once Main gave the order to start selling, everyone quickly began working. People from the city came over with different requests and started checking out the items. Some even insisted on buying specific things, but the team was ready and managed to give everyone what they needed. Before long, every single item was sold out. The kids were excited and proud that everything was gone. The residents who had allowed them into the city came by to compliment the shop and its workers. Then Shoji asked them about their decision. The residents happily agreed to let Akina's shop use their city as a base. They even said they hoped it would be used again in the future. Shoji felt really happy and thanked them for the support. He then turned to his team and said he would make sure to pay everyone for the great job they had done. All that remained was to grow the iron Shoji had received from Mode. He had been saving pieces of the iron on purpose, using them as seeds for later. When it was time to send the harvested iron to the royal capital, Shoji planned to have all the ordered tools ready and fitted for Maud. Maud looked at the iron and couldn't find the words to speak. The iron was perfect. He asked how Shoji managed to bring even more than expected in just 5 days. Maud said everything had turned out exactly as he thought it would. He always believed Shoji could do it, but only Shoji knew the truth. The cultivation skill had a frightening production speed, and it kept growing faster, almost like a game where progress doubled each time. Maud stared at the high-quality iron, which matched what he had requested. He was amazed by the large amount Shoji had collected. He wanted to know how Shoji did it, but he realized the method didn't matter. The dwarf became quiet. Shoji asked him what was wrong. Maud walked into the house and said that materials were a blacksmith's life. A good dwarf always took materials seriously. Some even traveled all the way to the mines to gather them by hand. When it came to buying materials, they only trusted reliable partners. Maud asked Shoji if he had ever heard of orichalcum. Shoji remembered it as the name of a legendary material often found in fantasy stories. Maud said this was an important topic for the weapon killer, which was Main, just in case anyone had forgotten. He explained that orichalcum was stronger than even mithril, and since it was the world's most powerful legendary metal, he believed he could use it to make a much better weapon. Main listened closely, clearly interested. Orichalcum was only available to people who worked with a large variety of raw materials. One day someone had discovered it by surprise, and since then it remained a bit of a mystery. Maud looked at the weapons he had made before and said he hoped to someday forge the best weapon using orichalcum. He also said he wanted to create a whole pile of weapons that would almost never break, something perfect for someone like the weapon killer. Main asked if he was serious. Maud said he had just started thinking about it and believed that if they could gather enough raw materials, then getting his hands on orichalcum might not be too far off. He also told Shoji that he trusted him, and that once they found orichalcum he wanted to be the one to forge it. Main's eyes sparkled with excitement. Seeing this, Shoji thought he'd really like to find the material someday, just to help make that weapon. Shoji remembered he still had one more question for Maud. He went back and asked why someone as skilled as him needed to make so many weapons from so much iron. Maud said that he actually wanted to introduce someone to Shoji, someone who had a big stockpile of iron. He handed Shoji a business card and told him to visit that place, saying he had a job to assign. Maud assured him that the client wasn't a bad person and that he should at least listen to what they had to say. Shoji and the others arrived at a large mansion and looked at it with curiosity. Main mentioned that it used to belong to a noble. Shoji didn't like the thought that someone there might be after his life. A man welcomed them and seemed happy to see them. He introduced himself as the owner of the mansion, Count Safid Valverendo. He also said he was just a poor local lord in the area. Shoji didn't care whether the man was a noble or what kind of work he did. He just wanted to finish the job quickly and earn a lot of money. They walked into the nobleman's house and sat down in a fancy room across from him. The nobleman seemed happy to meet Suji and thanked them for coming. Suji noticed that the man looked like a proper and classy noble. Suji introduced himself as Akina Shoji, and said that Main and Sasha were his guards. The nobleman touched his chin and seemed to think deeply. He stared at them closely as he came nearer, which made the group feel nervous. The nobleman, Count Safid, lowered his head and placed his hand on the table. Then he stood up and suddenly shouted how beautiful the two girls were. He said he wished he could have guards like them. The others became scared and uncomfortable with how the Count acted. Trying to change the topic, the Count suggested they all have tea after discussing the reason they came. Then he turned to the girls and said they should have tea with him. The room went completely silent. That was when Suji finally realized they were dealing with someone who chased after women. Main answered that she had work to do afterward, so it wouldn't be possible. Sasha added that she couldn't skip her duties while on a job. The nobleman frowned and said he felt bad, but also said he wouldn't give up. He even asked if they were free the next day. Just then, one of his servants came up behind him and reminded him that his wife would be angry. Count Safid suddenly slammed his hand on the table and said it was time to get to the real reason they were there. Suji, now a bit relieved, wondered what kind of job this was. It was also clear to him that even a man like Count Safid couldn't stand up to his wife. The Count said he wanted to buy weapons from Shoji, and not just a few, but a large amount. Shoji realized the number of weapons needed was similar to what Maud had ordered before. He wondered why so many were necessary. The Count then showed them a paper map and explained that his land called Rendo had a large dungeon. Shoji became curious. This kind of dungeon had monsters, treasure chests, and bosses. It was the kind of place adventurers would love to explore. The Count explained that because of the dungeon, many adventurers came to his territory every day. They explored the dungeon and gathered rare items, which had become an important part of the area's economy. Shoji started to understand that the entire territory had become centered around the dungeon. Then the Count's expression turned serious. He said they had found signs of something called a great rampage inside the dungeon. Shoji became tense when he heard that. The words were simple, but the meaning was serious despite not knowing what it was. The Count explained that a great rampage meant a large group of monsters escaping from the dungeon. Usually the monsters stayed inside, but when they reproduced too much or became too hungry, they sometimes came out in large numbers. This was very rare and very dangerous. Normally there were early signs of a rampage, and they had time to prepare. They could get people ready to stop it. But this time, the great rampage had started too fast and in too many places. There were so many signs happening at once that they couldn't keep up anymore. When Shoji heard what was said, he began to think. He believed that the recent appearance of wild, out-of-control monsters might be part of the great rampage. But then he wondered, hadn't those monsters been chased out from another area? Was the situation really that serious? The Count opened the window and explained that this great rampage was larger and moving faster than usual. At this speed, they wouldn't have enough time to get ready and stop it. The local knights and even the mercenaries hired by Count ISEKAI'D were not enough to handle the threat. They lacked both supplies and enough weapons. They all stood on the balcony looking over the city. The Count said they were planning an evacuation, but they weren't sure if they could do it before the danger arrived. Still, a nobleman must put the people first. That's why Count ISEKAI'D was determined to protect everyone. When Shoji walked up to him, the nobleman explained why he had ordered so many weapons from the blacksmith Maud. After hearing that someone might be able to supply a large number of weapons, the Count tested him first by ordering iron. Now everything made sense to Shoji. The Count then turned to Shoji and asked if there was a weapon that could be used by just a few people to fight back against the upcoming danger, and if it could be bought in large amounts. Shoji felt uneasy. They had only met today, yet this man was already giving him such an important task. He felt like scolding Maud for introducing him to the Count so suddenly, but then he thought, if this man was truly willing to pay well to protect the people, maybe it was worth trying to sell something that could help. Shoji started searching through his bag and asked if a disposable magic item would help. He pulled out a magic staff and explained that it was actually a special item made from lost magic technology. When Sasha saw the staff, she looked shocked and a bit uneasy. But Shoji quickly told her that it wasn't her staff and that he got it from a different source. Shoji then apologized and said that this disposable magic staff was one of the main products sold at their Akina shop. The Count was curious and asked how it worked, also pointing out that Shoji had called it disposable. Shoji explained that by pressing a switch on the staff, anyone could shoot a fire projectile without using any of their own magic power. He also said that just 3 out of 6 shots would be enough to take down a demonic bear. Shoji went on to say that his business partner had found a large number of these staffs in some ancient ruins. In about 5 days they would be able to collect around 300 of them. Each staff would cost 200 gold. The Count quietly thought about how powerful it would be to have 300 magic staffs in just 5 days. Just then, one of the knights came into the room to bring some terrible news. The Count asked what was wrong and why things were so loud. The knight, clearly in a panic, reported that they had received a message saying the Great Escape had already started. In just 3 days, the enemy would reach their defense line. This was happening much faster than anyone had expected. The knight also said that a powerful leader had shown up this time, which surprised the Count. Shoji wanted to know what kind of leader this was. The Count explained that this commander was not a normal monster. It was a leader of monsters, the kind that could not be beaten with guns or magic. He lowered his head and said that their magic staffs were meant to fight regular monsters, not ones like this. Even if there were too many enemies, they would still have a hard time fighting back because they had too few soldiers. Worse, their current weapons wouldn't stand a chance against this new threat. So the Count asked Shoji to provide 500 magic staffs and also a weapon that was much stronger than any staff. He needed these within 3 days and was willing to pay any amount of money to get them. Shoji started thinking about what to do. He asked Sasha-sanin to check if the magic staff was still the strongest item they had. Sasha replied that it was, unless Shoji had another business partner with better items. Shoji realized that the request was crazy even for a nobleman, but the offer of 100,000 gold coins for just 500 staffs made him reconsider. This would be the biggest deal he had ever made. Shoji wasn't someone who aimed to be a hero or save people in trouble, but he also didn't like seeing regular people suffer. The Count seemed like someone who would actually pay the full price. Also, this deal could be a big step forward for the Akina shop, which had only just started doing business. In the end, Shoji agreed to take the job. The Count was very pleased and promised to send fast-riding monsters to help with transportation, along with an advance payment of 10,000 gold coins. Shoji thanked him. When he returned to the shop, Shuji started working right away. Shuji told Aguma and the others to get 30 magic staffs from the warehouse and send them to the Count. He asked Sasha to protect the delivery, and told Main to guard him until they reached the main headquarters. After that, she and Sasha would both guard the staffs during transport. As for him, Shoji planned to grow more magic staffs and also find a weapon that would be stronger than the ones they currently had. After that, Shoji went back into the dark forest of destruction. He planned to grow more wands there. Right now, he only had 10. It would take him about 1 day to collect the remaining 460 wands from the area. That meant he had 2 days left to grow them. He also wanted to create a weapon stronger than a wand. To do that, he needed to learn how to grow wands in a better way. He did not have much time to think about it yet. For now, he decided to focus on growing the wands first. Shoji wanted to find the fastest way to grow them by planting the wands. It was still early in the day, but he tried taking one of them out of the ground. However, only the tip of the wand grew. He wondered if he was too early for it and threw it away since it was incomplete. However, he realized something and grabbed it back. He had never tried pulling it off before. In normal farming, the result was usually small and not fully finished. This wand was different. It grew from the top, and the top part already looked complete. As he stared at the wand's tip, he realized something. He remembered a story he had recently heard from Maud. It was the legend of orichalcum. The story said that this rare material sometimes appeared to people who worked with large amounts of materials. It could show itself as a hint to someone who handled many resources, or it might appear on its own. Shuji was not sure if that was really what it was. Still, something like this had happened before with materials other than orichalcum. That thought stayed in his mind. Shoji had used his cultivation skill in unusual ways while working with large amounts of materials. Because of that, he started to wonder if he could create something new with his cultivation skill. It would be something he had never done before. An hour passed, and Shoji first thought it was only wishful thinking, but he soon saw that it was not just a simple wish, it was a cultivation skill. When he planted one thing, many of the same things grew from it. The skill sounded absurd. After digging up another specimen, Shoji saw that it was ready to be switched. He tied it to a branch and planted that branch far away. Then he waited to see what would happen. 3 days later, the boys met the Earl. The Earl reminded them that they were close to the dungeon that served as the first line of defense in the Great Escape. They had received a message that several monsters would arrive that day. A guard soon shouted that the monsters were already coming. The monster which were approaching them were A-ranked demon bears. There were at least 10 of them. The Earl thanked Shoji for the 500 wands and called his work amazing. Still, he said he did not want to waste the wands if it could be avoided. Because of that, he asked if there was a stronger weapon they could use instead. Shoji then took an unfinished wand from his bag and said that this was the item he had in mind. Everyone looked at it and asked if that simple object was really the weapon. Shoji explained that it was a new weapon he had recently made. It was called a mana grenade. They quickly prepared to see it in action. Shoji then pressed something on the item and handed the grenade to Main and asked her to throw it at the monsters. He also asked Sasha to cast a powerful defensive magic around when the throw happened. Sasha cast the protective spell. At the same time, Main was prepared to throw the object. She swung her arm and threw it toward the bears with great force. The ball flew straight toward the monsters. Everyone waited to see what would happen. Shoji stood calmly as they watched. When the ball reached the bears, an explosion started to form. The blast grew larger and stronger in an instant. It was so powerful that everyone dropped their jaws. A loud and terrible noise filled the area as the demons died. Soon the noise faded, and only thick smoke remained in the air. The Earl looked at the battlefield and could hardly believe what he saw. All 10 demonic bears had been destroyed by the flames. Main was amazed and praised Shuji. Sasha simply said that the result was incredible. Shuji then explained how the new weapon worked. The mana grenade was simple, a person only needed to press the button and throw it. After that, the explosion would happen. That was all there was to it. Shuji also remembered something from an earlier test in the Dark Forest of Destruction. During that test, the wand had changed form and caused a special reaction. Instead of releasing flames, the wand itself exploded. As he had expected, his cultivation skill was amazing. He wanted Main to fill up the crater later. The Earl was excited and said the weapon had gone beyond his expectations. He believed it would help them fight the commander. He asked Shoji how much he wanted for it. Shoji named the price of the wands at 1,000 gold coins and the other weapon at 200,000 gold coins. The Earl turned to his carriage filled with gold coins and agreed to buy the weapon. The store workers were pleased with the deal. Shoji stood quietly and thought that nobles were truly rich. Still, he felt that all the work he had prepared was finally paying off. Soon after, one of the Earl's subordinates came and reported that the Central Defense Force had arrived. The Earl ordered everyone to move to the center. He also asked Shoji to explain how to use the mana grenade to the soldiers. It was finally time for Shoji and the girls to face the Great Rampage for the first time. Shoji showed the soldiers how to use the magic items. The Earl thanked him on behalf of the soldiers for the lesson. While they prepared, Shoji asked if he could watch their products defeat the Great Rampage. The Earl agreed and said it was good to have someone present who understood how to use them. Seeing an operation of this size was a rare chance, like a field trip. The Earl then said it was time to review the situation. They were at the main camp. From the dungeon exit where the demons came out toward the city, there was a winding road between the rocks. Several defense lines were placed along that road. If the demons broke through all those lines, the city would be lost. The Count pointed toward the dungeon and explained that the creatures coming out were their enemies, and they were more dangerous than usual. A soldier reported that monsters were approaching. Their number was impossible to count. Eyes appeared from the dungeon and stared at the people with anger. Shoji and the girls watched the scene. Soon monsters began climbing out of the dungeon. At first only their glowing eyes could be seen in the darkness. When they finally came out, many kinds of beasts and monsters appeared. That was when Shuji realized it was really the Great Rampage. Main felt afraid because of the huge number of monsters. Sasha said that books had never mentioned a number this many before. Shuji also believed the situation was dangerous. The Earl first ordered the use of wind magic to create a communication network between the squads. Then he asked Shuji to also listen. The Earl climbed a ladder onto a wooden platform. After reaching the top, he stood before the large army and asked for their attention. He introduced himself as Safed Valva Rendo, the Lord of the Rendo territory. In his speech, he spoke about the great rampage they were currently seeing. He said the speed and number of monsters were abnormal. The iron weapons he asked for from Maud had only arrived in small amounts and barely on time. Shuji tried to understand what the Earl was trying to say. The Earl continued by saying that if the situation continued, the city, which had become the center of dungeon-based industries, could burn to the ground. He then said that Akina store had sold him many powerful weapons in great quantities. Because of those weapons, they were ready to win the battle. He also spoke about himself. Everyone already knew that he was married. He joked that whenever he saw a beautiful woman, he would always invite her to dinner. After hearing this part, Shoji and the girls felt confused. The Earl finished his speech by saying that he wanted to protect everything he loved. That was why he came to grow their people and strengthen the industry. He said he was satisfied with what he had and would not give it up. The knights loudly supported him. They shouted that they loved their lord and would earn a lot of money for him. They also promised they would do their best to win. The Earl then said he would reward their efforts. Every soldier would receive a special reward for joining the battle. The more monsters they defeated, the bigger their reward would be. His words filled the soldiers with fighting spirit and strong motivation. Shuji felt surprised. He thought the Earl was very different from other nobles. This noble did not try to keep all the profit for himself. He worked like a good partner and thought about how the group could earn money together. He wanted everyone to benefit. Shoji felt that the Earl was similar to the store manager. The things the Earl cared about were close to the things Shoji cared about when running the store. Because of that, Shoji felt a strange sense of connection. The Earl soon gave the order to begin. His soldiers prepared to attack. Shoji wanted to see everything Earl Rendo had planned. All the soldiers stood in their positions. The Earl ordered the first operation to start. The frontline squad stepped forward. They held their magic wands and waited for the command to fire. After the order was given, the entire frontline attacked the monsters ahead of them. Shoji was glad they were using his wands properly. A lookout reported that the first wave of monsters had weakened. The Earl was glad to hear that and ordered the ground forces to move and intercept the monsters. They cut down the monsters that tried to move to the sides and handled the situation well. The archer team also followed up with rains of arrows. The monsters fell one by one. Shuji felt amazed. First the wands weakened the monsters. Then the attack forced the monsters to split into smaller groups after being weakened. After that, the soldiers intercepted them. The Earl clearly knew how to use the limited number of wands. Shoji could see that this was really a territory used to fighting. The Earl continued giving orders to the second and third interception squads. Shoji thought the battle could continue this way. Then a loud and frightening noise came from the dungeon. It was coming out of a bigger monster inside. Smaller monsters followed behind it. All of a sudden, the smaller monsters changed their movements. This surprised Shuji and the Earl. The smaller goblins started shrieking in unison like they were cheering. Shuji and the others then watched as the goblins made way to some other monsters. Behind the monsters, 3 bulls appeared. They then went for a charge attack and hit the soldiers like bowling pins. The Earl got worried seeing some of the ground troops defeated. Main said that the monsters were iron bulls. They had hard bodies like iron, but their movements should have been slower. Somehow they had gone beyond their limits. The lookout also reported that something was behind the monsters. This confused everyone because it was supposed to be a death march. A death march was when monsters moved forward without stopping until they died. They did not usually follow anything. Then a giant monster came out of the dungeon. It was several times larger than the others and stood behind them all. Everyone quickly understood that it was the one leading them. With a roar, it pushed the iron bulls past their limits and forced the monsters to start the death march. Shuji realized that this leader was a powerful monster that controlled the others. It was the first time he had seen such a thing. The monster directed the rampage and forced the other monsters into the death march. The lookout then reported another problem. At the front of the death march, which had entered through the hole created by the iron bulls, there were still civilians who had not escaped. The Earl became very afraid. The lookout guessed that those people had been hunting in the forest for a long time and had not received the warning. Main panicked because one of the villagers had injured her leg while trying to escape. The Earl found this situation terrible. The Iron Bulls attacked so quickly that the soldiers' weapons broke. The soldiers could not stop the invasion in several places. At this rate, the monsters would soon break into the city. The Earl fell into panic. He could not use the mana grenades because he needed to save them for the commanding monster. Still, he kept saying that there had to be a way to deal with the situation. When an Iron Bull noticed the helpless villagers, it chose them as its next target. The Earl shouted that they had to act immediately. He did not know what to do. In frustration, he struck his own face. He admitted that the strength of the commanding monster had gone far beyond what he expected. The whole plan had failed. He blamed himself and kept thinking that he should have done something sooner. Main called out to Shoji. Shoji looked at the Earl and realized that this was the first noble he had met in this world who seemed trustworthy. In this world, running a business freely required a good client, and help from the right person meant fewer losses. Shoji wanted to help people who shared the same ideals as him. He decided it was time to show the true strength of the Akina store. He signaled to Main. She quickly moved to cut down the monsters and save the civilians. The knights couldn't believe a merchant's bodyguard could move that fast. Shoji then turned to Sasha and asked if her magic could stop the monsters. Sasha said she could do it if the monsters were gathered in one place. However, she did not have any magic items that could affect several places at the same time. It was also clear that she had something like a disadvantage, just like Main. Shuji began handing Sasha several magic wands. He told her to think about one idea. A magic item could change its abilities when it was placed in an unusual state. For example, its power could change if it were cut in half or if its parts were rearranged. He learned this after accidentally creating the mana grenade and studying how it worked. Sasha said she had once read about this idea in old records about lost magic. The text explained that the power of a magic item did not only come from the magic stone inside it. The surrounding parts also affected how the item worked. The parts themselves also carried power. If several identical magic items were placed close to each other, the power from their parts could interfere with each other. This interference could create a reaction that was different from the original effect. After thinking for a while, Sasha created a spark around the large combined magic wand. With her improved wand, she aimed at the Iron Bulls and blocked their path with a wall of fire. The Earl looked surprised when he saw the flames. The lookout also could not believe they had already found a way to use the wand like that. Sasha explained that it was thanks to Shoji's advice. The Iron Bulls stopped moving. The Earl quickly ordered his men to share this method with every unit. If the ground forces could defeat the Iron Bulls now, however, the soldiers exclaimed that everyone was lacking iron weapons to fight back. Shoji said there was no problem. He explained that Akina store sold iron in large amounts. Maud had used that iron to make weapons, and Akina store had brought them by their carriage transport. He was sure they would make it on time. At that moment, several carriages had already arrived. Maud said it had taken time because of the large number of weapons. However, he had finished making 2,000 weapons and had just arrived. The Earl became cheerful again. He felt very thankful that Maud and the people from Akina store had helped transport the weapons. Nearby, the soldiers talked among themselves. One commented about a girl bodyguard who kicked a monster away. One said the sorceress had created a new way to use magic items in an instant. One also praised the massive transport team and the store manager who led them. In their eyes, Akina store had changed the situation very quickly. The store did more than just sell goods. Shuji explained that they simply did not want customers to die soon after buying their products. Main held a large sword and cut down the monsters. Sasha attacked with magic. The Earl's soldiers also continued to fight the monsters after Maud and the Akina store employees supplied the swords. This was Akina store's after-service time. The soldiers and the Earl felt very happy. They raised their arms and cheered. Shoji concluded they could easily deal with the small monsters. While they were fighting back, at the same time the monster commander finally came out of the dungeon. The lookout reported to the Earl that the situation had changed because of the help from everyone at Akin's store. The Earl said this was good news. He believed that once the smaller enemies were gone, they only needed to defeat the one in charge. The lookout then reported that the creature had already appeared. It stretched out both hands and tried to climb out while holding onto the cave wall. Everyone wondered what it was. The Earl said it was a high-ranking troll. Another person pointed out that it was much bigger than a normal higher troll. They believed it might be a mutant type. Among the troll species, this one was the strongest. When it fully came out of the dungeon, a soldier identified it as an arc troll. The arc troll was known for its strong ability to heal. People called it the disaster of an immortal creature. It recovered from light attacks right away. Old records even said it survived a powerful grand ritual magic performed by hundreds of magicians. Shuji thought it was strange that many unusual things were happening. As he walked toward the front line, the Earl ordered the soldiers to retreat. The monster slammed its fist into the ground where the first squad had been standing and blew them away. The others were terrified. The Earl exclaimed that it was his first time seeing a troll this big. He couldn't believe it had been living inside the dungeon all this time. Main returned to the group and first asked if Shoji was safe. A soldier reported to the Earl that neither the flame wands nor the iron weapons affected the monster. The Earl ordered them to use the mana grenades and asked if the nearby soldiers were already evacuated. Another soldier reported that the rest of the troops at the front had already been pulled back. Mana grenades had been sent to every position, but the soldiers still could not get close to the Arc Troll. They believed there was nothing more they could do. Seeing how conflicted the Earl was, Shoji and his team then reminded him that their after-sales service was still active. Shoji asked Main if she could throw a mana grenade far enough to reach the Arc Troll. Main picked up a grenade and said she probably could. The Earl was impressed by how confident she was with her shoulders. The soldier with him asked if it was really possible to reach a distance of 2 valleys apart. Main activated the mana grenade with a click and swung her arm. She threw the grenade with great force, which surprised the Earl. The grenade then flew toward the Arc Troll, and a huge explosion followed. After the blast, a thick fog spread across the area, and no one could see what happened next. Everyone just held their breath. When the fog cleared, they saw that the troll had been charred into a toast. Shuji thought they had finally succeeded, but then a loud cracking sound came from the troll's skin. Everyone could not believe what they saw. The cracks began to spread across the troll's body. Soon they covered its entire skin. Everyone then watched the troll's outer skin peel off and shatter. They couldn't believe it was actually molting. The troll was alive and well, even smiled and struck a pose. Main could not understand how it had survived a direct hit. The Earl felt amazed by the monster's life force. The troll seemed to mock them as it laughed out loud while moving toward the soldiers. It waved its hand left and right and destroyed everything in its path. The Earl began to panic. If the grenades could not work, they had no other way to stop it. He said they could not let the monster get any closer and told Main to keep throwing grenades. Main quickly threw more grenades. They exploded on the troll and exploded on impact. More cracks appeared on the monster's body. Shuji and the others felt shocked when they saw the crack spreading again. The troll shed its skin once more and continued to smile. Then its eyes lit up. The monster smiled again. Shuji and the others could not believe what they had just witnessed. The Earl fell to the ground and said that if their attacks were useless, there was nothing else they could do. He believed his land would soon fall. Shuji looked at the Earl and thought quietly. He knew he only had one plan. If it also failed, the entire operation would end. He wondered if he should take the risk, but he quickly pushed away his doubts. This was not the time to hesitate. If they had no other plan, then they had to try. Shoji told everyone that there was still a way to defeat the monster. He turned to Main and told her not to waste the manga grenades yet. Everyone felt surprised when they heard him say that the monster could still be defeated but questioned how. Shuji smiled and said that if his attack worked, they could deal enough damage to stop the creature from recovering right away. The Earl felt shocked and asked if that was really possible. Shuji pointed to the side and said that they first needed to finish evacuating the remaining soldiers. He also asked his comrades to return all the mana grenades. The knight and the Earl agreed. The Earl then used communication magic and called for Maud to come over. After a while, Maud rode up on horseback and asked Shoji if it was really his turn. Shoji turned to the short man and asked if he could make 2 large barrels right away. Maud thought for a moment and asked if they could win with them. Shoji agreed. Maud then started breaking nearby carriages and boxes. Confused, the Earl asked what he was doing. Maud then asked if there was a problem and told him to complain to Shoji. He began working on the barrels and said he would use the tools and materials he always carried. Soon the barrels were finished. The knight said it was amazing. In a short time, Maud had made strong and well-built giant barrels. The Earl said he was impressed by his skills and asked Shoji what he planned to do with them. Shuji walked over to Main and asked her to fill the barrels with grenades. She explained that the mana grenades were only the extra ones. When Shuji had grown the mana grenades, he had picked some too early and set them aside as a bad batch. Shuji told her to put all of them into the barrels, including the mana grenades. After filling them, she needed to push the grenade switches out and close the lids. Everything was soon ready. Shuji thought the method was similar to how hand grenades worked. He had used up all the mana grenades, so if this plan failed, they would have nothing left. The girl said she understood. Shoji planned to use the grenades like gunpowder, while the mana in the grenades would act as the fuse. The idea was simple, but the power would be strong. A soldier announced that all the troops had retreated. Shoji then told Main to throw the barrels at the Arc Troll. Main said the barrel was heavier than the log she had thrown before, but it would not be a problem. She only worried that she might not throw it straight. Shuji then turned to Sasha and asked if she could control the barrel's path with magic. Sasha said she would make sure it hit the target. Shuji also asked her to use defensive magic. Shuji activated the switches and asked Main to throw the barrels. Main picked up 2 barrels at once and threw them to the side. The wood made a loud creaking sound. Everyone was shocked. She then threw the large barrels toward the Arc Troll. Shuji turned to Sasha. The mage quickly activated the magic seal and used a wind-based magic spell. A burst of wind then appeared in front of her. It then pushed the barrels in the air and dropped right above the Arc Troll. The sight of the barrels curving surprised everyone. A moment later, the barrels exploded right in front of the monster's face. Everyone watched with anticipation as a large blast filled the area. Sasha immediately cast a defensive magic spell in front of the group. The blast was so loud and the wind was all heated up from the explosion. When the smoke cleared, only a huge crater was left behind. The knight soon announced that the commanding monster had been defeated. Right after that, the earl told the knights that they could now deal with the remaining small monsters. Everyone felt relieved and celebrated their certain victory. The next day, everyone gathered at Count Rendo's mansion. A celebration took place there. The earl told everyone that they could now drink to their success thanks to Akina's store. The earl then personally spoke to Shoji. He said that many unexpected events had happened during the Great Rampage. Even so, they managed to overcome the problems because of Shoji and his store. The earl then showed many large chests filled with treasure and gold coins. He said the reward was his way of showing deep gratitude and asked everyone to accept it. He then turned to the two female guards, Maud, the employees from Akina's store, and Shoji himself. He asked if they were interested in working under him. Shoji only smiled and politely refused. The earl sighed but said he understood. He then told Shoji about something that could help his business in the future. A certain race was searching for a capable merchant. Shoji became curious and asked what he meant. The earl explained that he was talking about the elves. Everyone felt shocked when they heard about them. Shoji asked if they would really trade with the elven country. The earl replied that he could not explain everything in public. He said he would share the full details in his office, but he strongly recommended the idea. Akina then wondered if it was really possible to have a new business venture in another country. He could see the others with anticipation in their faces. In this office, the earl explained the reasons why he advised Shoji to do business with the elven country. He also explained that he offered this trade to give them a safer route and a better future. Suddenly, he also shared how there were many strange things about the recent Great Rampage. They looked into the cause and found incense placed in different spots on the lower levels of the dungeon. This incense attracted monsters. It meant someone had started the Great Rampage on purpose. They did not know who did it or why. If the person who placed the incense knew about them, that person might see Shoji and his store as enemies. After all, they were the ones who stopped the Great Rampage. If they stayed in the territory, they could become a target. Moving to another country would make it less likely for the mastermind to go after them. The earl also said that the elves were searching for a merchant who could deliver large amounts of goods. They wanted items and technologies that their country did not have. He believed this would help them earn a lot of money. Because of that, he recommended the opportunity. He also said he hoped the Akina store would grow even more in the future. And so Shoji and the others bade farewell to the earl and the people. As they left by carriage, Main expressed amazement at being recommended to do business with the elves. Sasha asked what they should do. Shoji decided to head to the country of elves and trade with them. The others were glad with his decision. Shoji found this a chance to both distance themselves from things he didn't want to get involved in and expand his business in the process. Main exclaimed it was obvious that she would go wherever Shoji wanted to go, and she swore to protect him no matter what. Sasha also didn't have any issues following him as long as he funded her research. Surprisingly, Maud said he would follow them as well. Shuji wondered what this old man was even talking about. Maud then said he would become Shuji's personal blacksmith. Shuji would provide the materials and he would make something out of them. Last time he asked Shuji for a lot of iron as a test, and he somehow cleared it. He was convinced that Shuji would eventually obtain the orichalcum. With that, he could create the most powerful weapon. In his mind, Shuji hoped that Maud could recreate machine parts that were originally from Earth. Also, Maud felt excited because the land of the elves had many rare items. If he joined them, they might be able to make something interesting. For example, he could combine Shoji's magic wand with a cannon. Main and Sasha got excited over hearing such an interesting idea. Suddenly, Sasha remembered something and asked where Shoji had gotten such a large number of wands. They were the same type of magic item she had lent him before. She had heard him say that he found another supplier, even though she believed she was the only one who could get them. Maud was also curious about the many broken mithril swords. He asked where Shoji had gotten them. Since he would now be part of the group, he hoped Shoji would tell them. Shoji felt that the time had come to explain. Main stopped them and said it was not good to ask about their employer's secrets. Sasha argued that it would be hard to protect Shoji if his supplier suddenly turned against him. Main did not know how to respond. Shoji believed it would be even more dangerous to reveal the truth about his cultivation skill. If people learned that he could grow any product overnight, he would become a target. Main felt troubled and did not know how to help Shoji stay safe. Just then, Sasha suggested using contract magic. Many people used it to protect important business secrets. By making a contract, they could promise to keep the secret and protect each other. Shuji felt unsure about the idea. Many nations in that world used contract magic. However, Main had almost been forced to sign an illegal slave contract not long ago. He did not want to bring it up in front of her. To his surprise, Main supported the idea. Through the contract, she believed she could learn more about Shoji. Shoji asked if she felt uncomfortable when people talked about magic contracts. Main asked why. She said she only wanted to understand Shoji better so she could be more helpful. Shoji realized that Main did not see any harm in making a contract with him. He began to think it was not a bad idea. If he combined his cultivation skill with the help of the others, his store could grow. He then asked Maud and Sasha what they thought. Maud said it was normal for merchants to keep secrets about their supplies. He did not mind making a contract if it meant learning about Shoji's supplier. Sasha said she felt the same. Shuji felt grateful to them. He realized it was safe to share his secret with these people. Sasha then urged everyone to go to the contract magic shop and make the contract together. Main and Maud cheered. Shuji did not expect them to be so eager about it. The group went to the contract magic shop. The owner asked if they had already confirmed their names and the contract details. After they agreed, he created the contract without delay. The process finished almost instantly, which surprised Shuji. The only part that felt like fantasy was the blood stamp used to seal the contract. After that, Sasha said it was time for Shuji to reveal his secrets. Shuji explained that his home base was in the Forest of Dark Destruction. He said a strange wave in that area disrupted mana. Sasha said it would not be a problem because of her skill called mana control. This skill allowed her to control mana better than most magic users. Shoji and the others were surprised when they heard this. Sasha then told everyone to hurry to the Forest of Dark Destruction. Main and Maud cheered with excitement. Shuji realized he could not stop them anymore. He sighed and asked them to wait for a moment. Somehow Shuji had finally formed a team he could fully trust. Soon after, the group arrived at Shuji's base. Maud asked if the secret behind Shuji's stock was inside the place. Shuji had already prepared himself. He expected them to be shocked when they learned the truth. He opened the gate and showed them his secret garden. The place grew the same items he had been selling. Everyone was stunned. At the same time, they asked what was going on. Main felt confused when she saw potions growing from trees like fruit. Sasha noticed that the plants were man-made, but they were real. Maud looked at the field and saw swords growing from the ground. When he looked closer, he realized they were the same swords he had made before. Shuji also showed them lanterns growing from the soil like root crops. The group felt shocked and confused. Some of them pinched their cheeks to check if they were dreaming. Shuji noticed that even in this world, people used the same trick to test if something was real. Main then asked what all of this meant. Shuji explained that it was the power of his cultivating skill. He said the skill allowed him to grow any product he buried in the ground. Sasha finally understood the strange events that had happened recently. She had studied many skills before, but she had never seen or heard of one like this. Now she understood why Shoji had to keep it a secret from her before. Sasha said they could not even imagine the trouble they would face if this skill became known. She believed using the magic contract had been the right choice. Maud agreed and said their lives could be in danger just for knowing that such a skill existed. Anyone who learned about it might try to silence those who knew the truth. Shoji realized that knowing about his skill might become a heavy burden for everyone, but his expectation was wrong. Maud and Sasha suddenly laughed with excitement. Sasha felt thrilled because she could now study many magic items that used lost magic. Maud also felt excited. He wanted to create many new things. Shuji wondered if it had really been the right choice to reveal his secret to them. Main then said she would still follow Shuji even if he lost the skill. She said the skill had helped save her from the heavy debt she once had, but it was Shuji who had chosen to help her in the end. Sasha and Maud also promised that they would work hard for Shuji. The next day, Maud came out of his workshop and called for Shuji, who was working in the fields. He said he had already created a new product that they could sell to the elves by using Shuji's skill. Shuji felt shocked at how quickly Maud came up with an idea. Maud said he had some history with the elven country, so he knew a few things about them. The elves cared deeply about nature. They were skilled with medicinal herbs and spices. They also kept their distance from human countries. As Earl Rendo had said, the elves often looked for goods that their land did not have. They wanted machine products, which were a human specialty. Maud focused on that idea as the main product to sell in the elven country using Shoji's carriage. He explained that the roads in the land of the elves were full of plant roots. Because of this, it was difficult for carriages to travel. Maud thought the carriage could be changed so it could move more easily on rough roads. He planned to make a circular saw out of mithril, then create many copies using Shoji's skill. After that, he would attach them to the front of the carriage. This would allow the carriage to cut through the tree roots while moving forward. Shoji looked confused. Maud was eager to test his idea and told Shoji to start working right away. However, Main asked if it would be acceptable to cut the roots in a country that loved nature. Maud had not thought about that. Sasha also pointed out that having many blades on the carriage could be dangerous for the horses pulling it. Maud felt disappointed, but he still believed the idea itself was good. Shuji thought Maud had missed those details because of his strong passion. Even so, Shoji liked the idea of improving the carriage so it could travel better on rough roads. Instead of cutting the roots, he thought they should find another way to make travel easier. At that moment, Shoji thought about using technology from Earth. He had always wanted to recreate machines from his old world. If they combined Maud's skill and passion with Earth's technology, they could create a carriage that would become very popular in this world. Shuji then asked Maud if he knew something called suspension. The others were shocked to hear an unfamiliar word. Maud then asked what the hell that was. Shuji then explained that it was a shock-reducing mechanism for vehicles back in his hometown, and basically used a huge spring. Maud then asked what a spring was. Shuji then explained things to him. The next morning, Maud showed the mechanism that Shuji had talked about the day before. Shuji and the others felt surprised by how fast he finished it. Maud felt very excited after he learned about the suspension idea, so he quickly tried to build one himself. He said Shoji's explanation was a little hard to understand, so he tested different ideas and adjusted the parts until it worked. Shoji checked the mechanism and confirmed that it was a spring. Maud also explained that he had trouble making the grease and other thick lubricants. In the end, he managed to recreate them. Sasha gave him advice about which monster materials to use. Shoji did not expect that monster materials could be used in that way. They then worked together to upgrade the carriage and decided to test it. The suspension worked just as they expected. Shoji said the result was great and the ride felt much more comfortable. Main thought that this new design would not damage the roots. Maud felt happy to hear that the test product worked well. Even so, Shoji still had many ideas for the carriage. He shared more suggestions with the blacksmith. Maud felt excited when he heard about another upgrade. He suggested building a new workshop so they could make many changes to the carriage. Shoji offered to copy the finished products with his skill. Main commented that the two of them looked like they were having a lot of fun. Sasha said that men would always be kids even when they grew older. They spent several days working on the carriage modifications. After some time, Maud told them the work was finished. Shuji felt surprised that it had been completed so quickly. Maud then showed them the carriage. It already looked like an armored vehicle. He said he followed Shuji's suggestions. Instead of changing an old carriage, he built a new one from the start. Most of the parts used monster materials. He designed it in a way that matched the elves' taste. After finishing the work, Maud dropped to the ground and asked the others to handle the rest. Sasha checked on him and confirmed that he had only pushed himself too hard. He had stayed up all night. She suggested giving him an energy potion, which would help him recover. She then asked Main to carry the old man to his bed. Main lifted Maud over her head with ease. Before she left, Shoji asked her to help him with something after she put Maud in bed. Main understood but asked what it was about. Shoji said it was related to something Maud had been thinking about. The next day, everyone felt shocked by what they saw in the field. Large roots rose from the ground. They lifted many armored carriages with them. The sight surprised everyone. Maud told Shoji that he had still underestimated his power. Main said she was the one who buried the carriage earlier. Because of Shoji's strength, Maud would have time to build the same thing again. He also suggested using these results to create something else. He explained that Shoji's skill would help someone like him who wanted to make many things. Shoji felt glad to hear that. They then tested the new carriage. The horse did not even look tired while pulling the armored carriage. Maud asked about the wheels, which were also made from monster materials. Shoji thought the ride felt stable. Maud explained that Sasha's monster-repelling lanterns would make travel safe even at night. Since the main material was mithril, the carriage was both light and strong. Main felt amazed by it. Maud then asked Shoji if he was happy that someone like him had joined the Akina store. Shoji felt the same way and thought Maud could now create many things. The two men looked at each other in silence for a moment before giving each other a strong high five. With that, the product they planned to sell to the elves was finally finished. Soon after, Shoji and the others traveled to the land of the elves to sell it. They had heard that the road leading to the elven country was full of roots. However, they did not expect so many of them, and the roots were huge. For some reason, the roots were also bleeding. Half an hour earlier, someone from another carriage had shouted after Shoji and his group, but they did not pay attention. They kept praising the carriage as they moved forward. Soon they saw a gate ahead. Shoji and the others had arrived in the land of the elves. They were amazed by the beauty of the place, which really gave importance to nature. Main felt amazed seeing everyone's long ears. She felt moved since she was so poor that she couldn't afford to travel to another country. Shoji felt pity for this girl. Still, he didn't expect the country to look more modern than he had expected. It was time for another fresh start for the Akina store in this country. However, there was a problem with the ground. Roots spread across the roads and they were not the same size. The surface was rough and uneven. The elves had already gotten used to living with these roads. Shoji believed that once people saw how useful the carriage was, they would want to buy it. He also noticed something strange about the roots. Some of them released a liquid, while others did not. He wondered if Maud didn't even know about this. To start a business, they needed to ask about this first. For some reason, Sasha was being weirdly silent behind him. An elf suddenly called to them and asked if it was their first time seeing that liquid. Shoji asked what it was. The elf then offered some famous delicacy that the elven country currently had to offer. Main was glad to receive something free, but as she took a bite, her face turned red and she exclaimed how hot and spicy it was. The elf laughed and claimed the elven country could now get all of this spicy food. The elf explained that the soil had become polluted. Because of that, strange liquids started coming out from the roots. The roads had always had roots, but the liquid only began to appear about 5 years ago. No one knew the cause. The elf said it did not affect daily life or the water supply very much, but it made their food spicy. Now everyone lived like it was normal. The bigger problem was that the liquid quickly damaged the wheels of carriages. Hence, anyone who would need a carriage would be in trouble in this country. Shuji was surprised that the elves were too lenient on this matter. He assumed it was because elves were always known as laid-back people. He then noticed Sasha was distracted by something, thinking silently on her own. At that moment, a young elf girl wearing glasses approached them and spoke to Shoji. She told them to follow her because someone was calling for them. They soon met an elf who had been calling them earlier. The man said he only wanted to ask a few questions. The woman with glasses introduced him as Baron Award Laga Dry. Shuji didn't expect that such a person was a baron. He then realized the baron was the owner of the voice he had heard earlier. The baron said he was very interested in their carriage. He felt surprised by how smoothly it moved on the rough road. Even with bumps and roots on the path, the carriage moved without trouble. He also noticed that the wheels pushed away the strange liquid on the road. The baron explained that he had been given the job of improving the roads in the elf country. Because of this, he had been searching for new technology that could solve these problems. His secretary then said that the leaders of the country had simply forced the baron to fix the traffic situation. The baron laughed at the comment. Shuji realized that being a middle manager in this country was difficult. Shuji then explained that the carriage was a new product from his store. They had designed it after studying the road conditions in the elven country. They had brought it there so they could sell it. The baron wanted to see the carriage work right away, but his secretary reminded him that a meeting had already started. Because of that, he asked them to show the carriage again the next day. Another store was also planning to sell him a carriage, and he wanted the two carriages to compete. Because of budget limits, he could only sign a contract with one store. Shuji realized that someone had arrived before him. The baron said that one carriage would not be enough. The winner would also need to teach the elven craftsmen how to make the carriage so they could produce many of them. He promised a large payment. One carriage would cost 5,000 gold coins. The store would also receive 100 gold coins as a royalty fee for every carriage sold. Shuji quickly calculated the value in his head. If 100 units were sold, it would be worth about 100 million yen on Earth. In other words, he would compete with another store for a license agreement. Shoji felt very interested in this deal. However, he still needed to wait for Maud's approval of the license after the competition. The baron then left and told them to come to the backyard of his mansion for the competition. After that, Shoji turned to Sasha and asked why she had acted strangely earlier. Sasha said she had only become excited as a researcher after finding a new subject to study. Since Maud had already created a carriage, she believed it would now be her turn. She then asked Shuji, her employer, to help her with something using his skills. The next day, the baron thanked the merchants for coming. He claimed he had high expectations of them to solve the country's problems. He asked them to take turns to show their carriage's selling points. Shuji wondered who their competitor was. Surprisingly, it was some familiar faces. Main and the men from the other side shouted in disbelief. Main couldn't believe she was seeing the people from Buraburi shop. The two then exclaimed that it was Grigori shop. Still, they didn't expect to see them again, but they exclaimed that it was not only lanterns that they were selling. They told Shuji not to be confident this time that he would win. Grigori shop decided to present its new carriage. They explained it was a carriage with a light and durable body. They used the latest wood processing technology. Their main feature was a shock-absorbing system that used a magic item they had invented. The wheels had a special coating that prevented liquids from the roots from sticking to them. The baron was impressed. He expected as much from human technology. After that, Shoji introduced their new type of carriage. It was made of mithril, which was both light and strong. The baron finally realized why the carriage was glittering so much. The competitors thought that using that much mithril would cost a lot of money. Shuji told them not to worry since he would provide a stable supply of mithril at half the normal price. The carriage also had a magic lantern that could shine a distance. Its wheels used a shock-absorbing system called suspension. The wheels were made from monster materials. They were flexible and did not absorb liquid. After Shoji's presentation, the elven baron's attention shifted to the armored carriage. The men from Gregory's store were also impressed. Sasha suddenly interrupted and said the carriage had another feature. The baron already knew about her as a skilled researcher of magic items. He assumed she had something else to show. Sasha then asked Shoji to run the carriage over the liquid-covered roots. She explained that the carriage had a mechanism that could help with the problems in the country. When Shoji did as she asked, a sprayer behind the carriage turned on. It sprayed liquid over the roots. The dark liquid covering them quickly disappeared, like a wound healing. Everyone felt shocked. The roots stopped bleeding. Sasha explained that the device was a new technology called a plant antidote potion sprayer. Shuji added that the mechanism worked with the carriage's suspension system. Instead of spraying a potion on a person, it sprayed a plant healing potion on the roots. The idea came from Sasha's suggestion the day before. She always carried many potions that Shuji grew. Shuji also made a simple spraying device using Sasha's perfume bottle as a base. However, Sasha explained that the potion only worked on plants for a short time. The effect only treated the surface. It could not fully stop the roots from bleeding and it could not heal the soil itself. Even so, the baron felt impressed. Their past research had not found anything that could even treat the surface of the roots. Shuji also suggested using the sprayer on roots that were not bleeding yet. He said that if many carriages with sprayers traveled across the country, they could help reduce several problems. It would not solve the main cause, but it would still help. With that, his presentation of the Akina store's new carriage ended. The people from Gregory's shop already looked defeated. The Baron made his decision without delay. He declared that Akina's store had won completely. He asked them to begin talking about the contract right away. The people from Gregory's shop ran away while cursing. They swore they would not lose next time. They promised to study more and create better products. Later, Shoji and the others returned home and talked with Maud. Maud said he had never heard about soil contamination in the Elven country. Shoji said they could delay the contract if Maud did not want to continue. Maud said he did not mind. He explained that he had already mastered that technology once. Since it was now in the past, he did not care if the rest of the world tried to copy it. He believed he would master new things anyway. Sasha then asked if he knew anyone from the Elven country who could examine the strange liquid that came from the tree roots. Shuji wondered why Sasha was still focused on that problem. Maud said he could not say for sure that he knew someone who could help. However, he thought one person might understand what was happening. He mentioned someone called the eccentric sage of the Elven forest, Flay. He also said that she was a strange person.